Hey guys, tonight the room hushes into a soft shoreline of sound. You lie under a gentle fan as briny night air lifts the curtain, and a small pool of lamplight ripples like water across your blanket. The cotton is cool against your forearms. Your breathing slows. The day loosens its grip like a knot slipping free. If we were actually sailing into the Atlantic right now with real waves and questionable rations, you probably wouldn't survive this without a better jacket and the ability to tie at least 3 knots. So let's keep this voyage comfortably imaginary. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you're listening from and what your local time is. I love picturing this little fleet of sleepy harbors around the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your lamp is a tame sun, steadier than surf. Yet it shivers as you pull a wrinkled map closer. The paper is soft as old linen. You trace coastlines with one fingertip, islands like freckles, currents like long arrows that know exactly where they're going. The fan above rehearses its ocean impression, turning the room into a pocket-sized harbor. Your explorer's kit is a blanket, a lamp, and too many snacks. History approves. And you, a calm voyager in a cotton t-shirt. Consider an art few of us practice how places disappear without leaving a trace. You begin beside another lamp, 2.5 millennia ago, in Athens. A philosopher named Plato writes about a great island power that prospers beyond the pillars of Heracles, and then, in a single grievous day and night, vanishes beneath the sea. That is your steady historical fact for this stretch. Our earliest detailed account of Atlantis comes from Plato's dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, composed in the 4th century BCE. He places the story beyond those pillars, a boundary most scholars understand as the Straits at Gibraltar, the threshold between the Mediterranean and the Atlantic. The map warms under your palm, storing the ghost of your hand the way sand remembers a footprint. Your lamplight ripples again. There's our callback pretending it's tiny surf washing the edge of your blanket. You half close your eyes and imagine the scrape of a reed pen, the smell of olives and oil smoke drifting through Plato's room, and the murmur of friends debating whether stories should be hammers or mirrors. He chooses a mirror polished with cautionary lesson, a city in rings, canals gleaming, metals bright as sunrise, power rising and breaking like a wave. But the sea carries more than philosophy. There's a less attested sailor's tale you tuck carefully to the side, like a seashell that might be cracked on glassy nights. Some mariners say they hear faint chiming from below, as if a drowned plaza still keeps time. It's campfire material, not classroom evidence. You label it maybe the way you label a jar of mysterious spice found at the back of the cabinet. Still, the idea hums under the lamp like a second filament. You don't have to believe it to feel it changing the temperature of the room by a degree. Historians still argue whether Plato intended Atlantis as an ethical allegory, hubris inflated and then neatly deflated, or whether his story preserves a blurred cultural memory of real disasters. Perhaps the Bronze Age eruption of Thera, also called Santorini, whose ash darkened skies and shook seas far beyond its own horizon. They debate the scale, the sources, even the meaning of pillars. You won't referee. You're not here to stamp a verdict. You're here to practice listening for how the world erases itself so thoroughly that only the softest outlines remain. If you were an ambitious city that needed to vanish responsibly, you might hire time, water, and silt as your consultants. Let storms carry away your corners. Let organisms nibble your edges. Let legends pad the gaps with velvet. Trust that after a while even the sharpest plinth looks like weather. The planet is astonishing at this kind of housekeeping, and the ocean, generous accomplice that it is, files things in cabinets that rarely open. You circle the phrase "pillars of Heracles" with your finger and allow certainty to blur a little. Even that identification with Gibraltar, your mainstream anchor a moment ago, is a conclusion assembled from texts and context. The world hides in plain sight. The surviving Critias manuscript even breaks off mid-sentence, like a storyteller who drifted to sleep before the ending. That is the kind of absence you are training your ears for tonight, the sort that invites a listener to lean closer and fill the rest with breath. You shift on the pillow, and the blanket swishes like beach sand. You think of smaller vanishings, a footprint filled by the next wave, a candle pinched to darkness, a cafe closing quietly with a paper sign that says, "Thank you." Disappearance isn't always tragedy. Sometimes it's tidying up. The soft closing of a drawer. Places do it. People do it. Even names slip between pages. The trick is to hear the moment before the slip, to notice time moving its furniture with felt pads. For the sake of one more gentle grin, and to respect our joke quota, you imagine ancient mariners using GPS. Recalculating, the device would say calmly for the 14th time, and the helmsman would nod as if a wise ant had spoken. The Atlantic, being an accomplished comedian, would wait for the perfect pause and then splash the helmsman's sandals. You promise the sea you will laugh quietly and share your snacks, which is about as heroic as this expedition needs to get. You return to the lamp and the map. The halo becomes a tide pool. The curtain breathes. Your breath matches. Beyond the pillars, your fingertip hovers, and you picture a vast, dark plain where continents shrug under 1,000 fathoms. You think of stones stacked by hands that believed they would be seen forever. You think of the patience of silt, its velvet confidence, the way it writes a lullaby over everything it keeps. The lamp shivers again 3 times the charm, and you let the callback land like a smooth pebble in a bowl. You hear, not with ears but with posture, the shapes of stories just ahead, a volcano waking, a library breathing, a city that learns to sink twice. You feel the mild, good silliness of taking snacks on a voyage of the mind, and you tuck that in, the way sailors tuck talismans into pockets. Somewhere below the imagined deck, that fringe bell chimes once, or doesn't. Either way, the quiet approves. The fan writes ocean on the air, and you place your finger on the painted straits and press gently, not to puncture, only to promise. The promise is simple. You will look with soft attention at places that vanish, and you will let their quiet teach you how. And when you finally stand light-footed, careful you carry the lamp, the map, and the wave with you, not as trophies, but as ways of moving toward the next hush. You lean over a wax-scented table where papyrus crackles softly, olives glisten like small moons, and a philosopher's voice drifts like smoke around the rafters. The oil lamp on the table throws a golden puddle, and you smile at the way it ripples. Yes, the same trick your own lamp kept doing, as if even this Athens room keeps a private tide. The wax smells like warm honey and clean wool. The wine on your tongue is a little sour, but it minds its manners. Outside, donkeys clop past like patient metronomes. Inside, Plato arranges words in neat rows the way a mason fits stones, not hurried, not afraid of silence. You settle into the cool of the stone bench and run a fingertip over the papyrus edge, brittle as a fall leaf. A reed pen rests nearby, green-stained from use. Plato's friends listen the way you breathe right now, slow, shared, almost a ceremony. He is composing, or perhaps rehearsing, a tale he will set into two dialogues called Timaeus and Critias. That's your sturdy anchor fact this evening, these works. Written in the 4th century BCE, scholars often say around 360 BCE are the earliest detailed source for the island power that rises, then vanishes. You don't announce it like a textbook. You let the words grow beyond the pillars of Heracles. A maritime empire, rings of land and sea, a temple bright with alloy that later readers will call orichalcum, shining like dawn caught in metal. The olives tempt you. You reach, then remember that Greece and ancient manuscripts are not a great couple. You compromise by sniffing one like a tiny perfume bottle. It smells of brine and shaded leaves, which, frankly, is an underrated cologne. Plato notices nothing. He's busy turning your head into a theater. In his voice, a journey emerges. Solon, the famed Athenian lawgiver, travels to Egypt. Priests in the delta city of Sais unroll memories older than Greek cities. Stories in hieroglyphic closets exhale dust and sea wind. The thread passes to Critias, who passes it to you. The papyrus rustles again, and you hear the old scribe's bell you imagined earlier give one faint ring in some drowned square or knot. You let maybe be your companion animal tonight. Historians still argue whether beyond the pillars of Heracles always means the Strait of Gibraltar in Plato's time, or whether the phrase might float, used in earlier poetry for other thresholds, sending our imaginary ships slightly astray. They also keep sparring over that severe number 9 or 1,000 years before Solon, some suggesting it could be a translation tangle, perhaps months mistaken for years. You keep your elbows off the papyrus and let the debates pass like a breeze through the doorway. Real refreshing. Not yours to cage. You study the room the way you traced coastlines on your map. Shelves hold more rolls, knots of string around their middles like belts. The academy, Plato's school, lives in a grove outside the city proper, but this is a city house borrowed for the evening plaster cool under the fingers. The floor tamped smooth, the light polite. You imagine students slipping in after lessons, whispering about forms and ethics. And one of them, tragically, tripping over your snack bag. You rescue the bag, give history a nod, and promise to chew quietly. Plato's voice lowers. He does that thing where a storyteller pretends the room is smaller so the imagination can be larger. A righteous city faces a proud island. There is a storm. There is a sinking. The papyrus will later fracture the tail the Critias breaks off, famously, mid-sentence, leaving a clean edge where endings should be. You feel that edge even now, like the place a seashell once touched your palm and then wasn't there. The absence does an elegant job. It makes you lean in further. Your steady fact has company Plato lived from 427 to 347 BCE, listened to Socrates, taught Aristotle, and founded the academy. You let those names walk through the room like quiet relatives visiting after dinner. The familiar treads don't disturb the lamp. The unfamiliar does a less attested anecdote whispers from a corner of intellectual history, claiming that a Renaissance collector once swore he had seen a sketch from Plato's own hand of ringed harbors, a sketch now lost, cited in a letter of dubious provenance. You set it gently in the cabinet of maybe, beside the mariner's chime, with a label that reads charming, unverified. You don't need it, but it does make the air taste a little like ink and myth. Plato pauses to sip, and you notice how his fingers are stained at the nail beds, the way long writers' hands often are. He smiles at the way you hover over the edge of the page like a gull. You smile back, and in this polite exchange, a neat little joke forms in your head. If the Academy had Wi-Fi, the password would probably be forms and good, and everyone would pretend not to be confused by capitalization. You keep it to yourself. Humor travels badly across millennia unless it has olives. The wax puddle on the lamp softens and pools. You remember your own lamp at home, the pretend surf it made on your blanket, and feel the rooms fold into each other like sheets fresh from the line. Athens is the same temperature as your breath. Outside, farther down the street, someone laughs in a way that says they have no intention of going to bed soon, and you wish them well from the borderlands of sleep. Now Plato's voice lifts again, and he raises a finger you can almost see in the warm light. He wants you to notice the use of story. It is a mirror, yes, but also a map, and perhaps the reflection can guide a vessel. He is not writing journalism. He is writing a lesson that wears a sea cloak. Still, your mind, happily stubborn, peeks past the cloak. You picture real islands. You remember the volcanic name that floated by earlier, Thera, and make a mental note to carry that ember with you, because it will smoke again soon. Historians still argue whether Plato's narrative leans on real catastrophe memories tangled with Egyptian annals, or whether it springs fully armed from his philosophical brow, a myth precisely engineered to scold empires and flatter his ideal Athens. The debate is a comfortable neighbor now. You let it snore softly in the next room. You fold one edge of the papyrus back and catch a glimpse of ordinariness that feels like a blessing, a quick tally of amphorae in a margin, perhaps from another text, or a scribe's practice flourish, the literary equivalent of doodling cubes during a meeting. You love that. The world's most argued over island, and, beside it, buy more oil. You enjoy a second quiet joke somewhere in future centuries. A scholar may pore over your grocery list as the missing key to everything. Note the recurring olives. They'll write, a clear preference. As Plato returns to rhythm, you catch the soft, grassy creak of papyrus when he turns a sheet. The material is plant and river and sun the Nile's handwriting. You think about how stories migrate Greek ears listening to Egyptian lips, your ears. Much later, listening to Greek words, your fan at home, writing ocean on your air. A procession of listeners moves forward, each one tipping a little lamp into the next hand. The glow is small, but look how far it has traveled. A cool draft slips under the door. You like it. It tastes like unbaked clay and night. You imagine the straits again, the painted ones you pressed a finger on earlier, and wonder how many voices the wind has carried through that narrow mouth. You can't help a third soft joke if the Mediterranean had a voicemail. It would be full, and you would leave a message anyway, because that is human tradition. The night in Athens thickens into a velvet that remembers stars even when you are indoors. The lamp gutter flickers and rights itself. You watch that small, stubborn steadiness and think the art you practice tonight isn't to capture a city, but to listen to the quiet that follows its outline. You accept that in this room, too. The outline is important. The Critias breaks. The ending is missing. The absence hums like your imagined bell. This hum is not a failure. It is a space for breath. Before you stand, you let one more neat fact place a bookmark in your mind, the city of Sais, where Solon supposedly learned the tale, was dedicated to the goddess Neith, whom Greeks often link to Athena. That association has pleased commentators for centuries, like two statues nodding across a river. It will please you later, when temples rise from silt and a granite face looks at you through water. For now, you thank the room silently, so as not to alarm Plato, and you return the reed pen to its rest, the way you returned your finger to the map straits gently, not to puncture, only to promise. The promise remains what it was to keep walking forward with a soft step. Noticing how the world teaches disappearance, you leave the olives undisturbed because you are brave like that, and you take with you the smell of wax, the crisp murmur of papyrus, and the echo of a voice that has practiced speaking to centuries. On your way out, a donkey stamps once, agreeing with something, and you consider this your official peer review. You step from the Athens room into night that smells of tar and rope, and the deck takes your feet the way a calm animal lends its back to a rider. Constellations skate over dark silk water. The planks breathe. The Aegean murmurs like someone talking in sleep. The lamp glow behind you, remember that little ripple shrinks to a warm coin as the ship noses into open black. Your hands find the rail, crusted with salt like sugar on the rim of a glass, and your breath joins the sea's long inhale. Exhale. The old metronome the donkeys were keeping earlier, now passed to waves. You are not the helmsman, good news for everyone, but you share the night with people who are. They glance up to check the sky app that never needs charging, the arc of the Little Dipper, the steadfast prickle of the North Star, Orion shouldering west. You repeat their checks like a courteous copycat, and your reward is the shiver of knowing you could make shore with nothing but a quilt of points for a map. You also retie the line at your feet into what experts call an ambitious shoelace, which is, emotionally, a knot. Low islands drift by, dark shoulders against a darker sea. Key, Kithnos, Seriphos, names you feel in your mouth like seeds. Somewhere to port, Melos keeps obsidian memories. For thousands of years, people napped glassy black into sharp news and sent it island to island. That is your anchor fact for this stretch. The Aegean has been a trade web since deep prehistory, with Melian obsidian found far beyond sight of its lighthouse cliffs. Tonight, you sense that web in the easy nods between sailors, in the way a lantern is covered as we pass a sleeping cove. Roots are not just lines on water, they are habits in bones. A crew member unwinds a coil of rope, and it exhales hemp and sun. You like the smell. Someone once marketed this as eau de harbor, and it would have sold out to every ant with a beach house. The helmsman grins and taps the tiller twice a ritual, or maybe just a fidget, and you return the grin. A small cup is passed, and you taste watered wine that carries a rumor of resin. Somewhere behind the mast, a gull makes that surprised baby cry they do, and you laugh softly so as not to wake the gull. You are considerate that way. Ahead, the idea of Crete gathers like a dawn before dawn. Not yet a line, more a temperature. You think of the palaces there, Knossos with its airy courts and red columns, Phaistos with its wide steps, and of a script still keeping its secrets. Another steady fact drifts up linear A. The writing used in Minoan centers for centuries remains undeciphered by modern scholarship. You let the thought sit like a sealed jar on a shelf. There are groceries we still cannot read. It is oddly restful, like a book that promises not to be finished before bed. The oarlocks thock in a gentle heartbeat when the breeze falters, then fall silent as the sail fattens again. Your wake scribbles briefly and is erased. Lesson 1 in vanishing water is an editor with a very tidy desk. The sailor nearest you hums. Maybe a song learned from a grandmother on Naxos. Maybe something new the sea is coaching into his throat. On nights like this, a less attested bit of boatyard lore says, you can hear drumming under the waves near Amnisos, as if underwater halls host festivals for fish. You label it like the mariner's bell, and the Plato sketch charming, unverified, and keep it for company. Wind strokes the rigging into a whisper. You remember the olives you left unmolested on Plato's table. The self-control remains impressive, and catch a phantom trace of their brine in the brine of the sea. The sailors talk of cargo copper, oil, pots with seals like tidy autographs. Someone mentions a dolphin that followed them all morning, playing at the bow as if the ship were a friendly whale. Someone else points toward a small constellation and gives it a name their father used, not the one you know. And you realize the sky can be local. 2. The ship lists slightly, cozy as a hammock. Historians still argue whether the Minoans of Crete held a true thalassocracy, a sea empire policing these lanes, or whether their influence looked more like a dense and polite trade network, with prestige and pottery doing as much work as ships and spears. They also argue whether the palace's relative lack of big outer walls means a long, peaceful confidence, or just defenses built in other ways, now erased by time. You let the debate drift like two dolphins pacing the hull. Each takes a turn riding the bow, and both make the night more alive. By the mast, a sailor scratches a chalk star onto the deck and taps it with his foot. A little ritual you decide is either navigation or luck maintenance. Both are fine. You try a joke on yourself. Ancient GPS customer support must be a long flute solo of crickets, and you feel sleep smile at the badness of it. The helmsman mutters to the boat, the way people talk to plants. Good girl. Keep the line. It listens. The sail glows faintly, where starlight spills through the weave, and you reach up to feel the cloth. Rough like a bakery towel kissed by salt. The ship threads the Cyclades like a needle through a beaded bracelet. Paros slides starboard, shadow on shadow. Naxos sits heavier, the way a cat sits on your lap and continues to sit because that is the law. You brush your sleeve and taste tiny crystals. In your head, you unfold an old fresco dolphins leaping across a blue wall, lilies bowing to an imagined breeze and place it back carefully. Another tidy fact comes forward for a moment, nods, and moves on wall paintings from the Aegean showships with high sterns and long banks of oars. Testimony to lives braided with water. The decks you stand on tonight could be cousins to those painted craft. Someone points east where, long away, a faint low circle of darkness hovers an island that sleeps with a caldera's quiet. You don't name it aloud. The ember you tucked from earlier stories glows in your pocket. Patient. For now, your job is simple: watch how stars move relative to a mast and feel the small adjustments keep you on a long, invisible road. You think of your lamp's puddle back home, of its steady shiver, and realize the sea has been practicing that trick since long before glass and wick. The callback feels like the tide kissing the same step again. Near midnight, the wind tilts cooler, and a sailcloth thwops once like a big, soft book closing. A crewman tells a quarry-side tale near Knossos. When the south wind blows right, rock-cut caves in the cliff mouth the sea's boom into bellowing that locals used to call the bulls. It fits the island's myths too well to trust, so you hang it in the maybe cabinet with the label eco-friendly legend. Still, you put your palm to the rail and feel the wood's sympathetic hum. The night seems to like a good story as much as you do. You check your ambitious shoelace and try again, producing a better knot that a kind, patient person might call abstract. If you had to write a resume for piracy, you would put excellent snack rationing near the top, followed by enthusiastic listener, which you decide is an underrated maritime skill. The helmsman lifts his chin toward the horizon. A darker dark becomes a line, becomes a shoulder, becomes what you came to see Crete assembling itself from absence. You feel a very quiet tada happen inside your chest, like a kitten meow with good manners. Before the shape resolves into detail, a last small lesson rises with the smell of resin and pitch. Everything that moves here leaves a wake, and every wake vanishes. Pots cross from island to island, and then their shards sink into soil. Names ride wind, then rest. A chalk star on a deck wears off under bare feet. You remember the Critias breaking off mid-sentence and think perhaps the sea's favorite punctuation is the ellipsis. The gull makes its surprised baby cry again. Approving your grammar, Crete's shadow swells. You make out the thought of headlands, the almost blue that is really black. From some quiet cove, a dog answers the ocean once and then decides the matter is settled. The helmsman stands a little taller, and the tiller speaks in a faint wooden dialect you are starting to understand. You hold the rail and let the island come to you the way sleep does not captured, not forced, only welcomed, somewhere in the very far distance, beyond sight and schedule. A volcano keeps its own counsel. For now, the deck, the rope, the stars, your patient teachers carry you toward a shore that knows about building and forgetting. You arrive at the edge of an island shaped like a bitten ring, and the air tastes faintly of warm stone, as if the earth has been baking bread all day. Low houses lean into lanes, pottery dries on racks. A cat kneads the roof of a kiln with professional seriousness. Someone has set a bowl of olives in a doorway. Look at you, staying noble and not touching, and somewhere, very far beneath your sandals, something the size of a mountain takes a breath. The sea, usually your metronome, holds still for half a beat, and the stillness is louder than any drum. You follow a lane into Akrotiri, the town that will someday sleep under ash. Frescoes bloom on plaster like summer kept indoors lilies, swallows, blue monkeys that look as if they have opinions. You run your fingers near, not on, the paint, and feel the cool pulled from the wall into your skin. A potter's wheel whispers. A woman lifts a jar like a planet. Cloth brushes stone. Your steps fit the rhythm as if you practiced on the ship's deck. When the oarlocks thocked in time and then fell quiet, you smile at the memory of your ambitious shoelace, upgraded to abstract, and resolve to keep knots to rugs and not to disasters. The first ash is a kindness, soft as talc, kissing the backs of your hands and making your eyelashes grainy. You blink, and each blink feels like the turning of a papyrus page. Far off, the horizon bulges orange, a bruise of light, and you think of your lamp back home rippling, that small puddle imitating a tide, only now the ripple runs along the whole sky. The cat stops kneading and stares at nothing in particular, which is the animal way of saying, A boy pauses with a basket and listens. You listen too. This is the settled fact you carry gently. In the middle of the second millennium BCE, the volcano we call Thera Santorini, in later tongues, erupted on a scale that cracked maps. It was among the largest eruptions of the last few thousand years, sending columns into the stratosphere, spreading ash across the Aegean and beyond, and loading the sea with waves that slapped coasts awake. Akrotiri, extraordinary in its luck or its timing, ended up beautifully entombed homes, stairways, jars, and brushstrokes sealed beneath pumice and ash. A Bronze Age breath held for you to meet much later. You tuck the fact into your pocket as you would tuck a talisman, careful not to jingle it. The ground introduces its new language, a long vowel of a rumble, then a consonant shiver that your ankles translate. The potter steadies the wheel. The woman sets down her jar with the same care you give a sleeping phone. Dust lifts from rafters like birds. If you were playing a video game, this would be the tutorial level on how to leave calmly. And you would immediately fail it by stopping to admire a fresco of a ship with high sterns and a tufted sail. You forgive yourself. It's an excellent ship. On the shore, pumice begins to float in, chalk loaves bobbing, as if the island is sending out trial balloons. A fisherman touches one with a toe, shrugs, and nudges it back like a polite return of a borrowed dish. Another less attested tale threads through the spray. Some modern sailors swear that in certain moonless hours, the caldera breathes a low note you feel more than hear, like a bell rung underwater, the cousin to your drowned plaza chime. Charming, unverified, you label it. Still, when you rest a palm on a wall, you think you feel the note move through stone like a migrating whale. Wind shifts and warms, and with it a smell like baked clay and a faint tang of sulfur. The world's least popular perfume. Your throat tightens. You drink air slowly and feel it soften as it arrives. The sea darkens to a color that reminds you of olives cured too long, and the first small stones land on the lane with the sound of knuckles on a door. You remember the joke you made about ancient GPS being a flute solo of crickets, and are smugly pleased to discover it holds up the island offers crickets. Yes, but also an entire orchestra of hisses and low drums, proving excellent customer support. Historians still argue whether the eruption took place closer to 1627 to 1600 BCE, as radiocarbon and ice core hints suggest, or in the later 1500s BCE, as pottery timelines within the Eastern Mediterranean prefer. They also wrangle over degree how much this one event unseated Minoan power, and how much credit or blame belongs to aftershocks, quakes, and opportunistic neighbors with island-proof shoes. The debate doesn't cheapen what you feel. It frames it. The way a dark mat makes a bright painting brighter. You keep the frame in your peripheral vision and stay with the breath and heat. Ash thickens, and the lanes go velvet. Steps that were edges become slopes. The cat, who knows many things that cannot be written in linear A or any script, slips into a doorway where a mat hangs, and you instinctively duck too. Inside, the air is warmer and oddly muffled, like hiding under a blanket fort while the house hums adult business. Your eyes adjust to the soft, lamp-colored dark, and for a second, you are back at Plato's table, the wax smelling of clean wool, the papyrus whispering. The Critias breaks off mid-sentence in your memory. The island seems to be writing its own ellipsis in ash. A pot rolls softly under your foot. You catch it with the reflexes of a person who has already saved one snack bag this week. The walls murmur, a gift from the very busy giant below. You find a window and look out carefully, like a child peeking at birthday candles before everyone sings. The sky is a stack of grays, the topmost layer backlit by molten quiet, snow. You think for a drowsy second, and the brain accepts it because the flakes float just so. Then taste tells you different. This snow is mineral, the flavor of shattered rock, of lava ground fine as flour. It is not unpleasant, it is specific. You walk again, because walking is what you do when the world is changing shape under your shoes. Neighbors pass with bundles and brief explanations. Someone laughs once, the way people do when the only alternative is to display all their feelings at once. A grandmother steps aside so a jar can be tied by someone with a better shoelace certification than yours to a donkey. And the donkey, who put in his metronome shift in Athens earlier, nods at the promotion. The donkey's ears collect ash like little roofs. On the beach, the sea does what it always does. It forgets a little and remembers a little. Waves carry pumice like toy boats. Set them down, pick them up again, undecided. You wade, and the water is warm in bands, as if someone has unrolled invisible blankets under the surface. The warmth brushes your shins and leaves, returns and leaves, like a friend who cannot commit to saying goodbye. A child scoops a bowl of the floating stones and pronounces it soup. You approve the recipe and recommend salt sparingly. You pause with the rest of the island, and the volcano exhales a sentence you cannot parse, part consonant, part drum, part the deep vowel that first touched your ankles. You find, to your surprise, that your body answers not with sprint, but with stillness. The way you stood still beside the helmsman when Crete rose from the dark. You think of your lamp's ripple again, and understand that this too is a lamp, an upside-down one, its flame hidden under earth, its light shared as heat and ash, and the knowledge that nothing is finished, only paused in between shapes. As the air fills, another fringe story sidles in. Hand raised to the maybe cabinet, some locals tell visitors that when the wind slides right down the caldera in winter, you can smell cinnamon, and they claim, smiling, that it is the island remembering ancient spice jars in forgotten warehouses. You know it's the sulfuric chemistry of your stubborn planet doing its routines. But it pleases you to imagine a memory of trade ghosting through weather, the way Melian obsidian once ghosted across waters, glinting in strangers' hands. You tuck the town into your pocket, the way you tucked that talisman fact, not as a trophy, but as a way of walking more softly. When you set the pot back on its side table, you use 2 fingers and a breath, and it makes the tiniest clink, like a bell in a distant square, or like the idea of one. You do not rescue the whole town. You could not. And that has never been the premise of tonight. You rescue a gesture, a fresco swallow, a single jar that will not go into your grocery list. By the time you look back, the bitten ring of the island has become a deeper bite, and the sea is stitching ripples closed as fast as it can. You step toward the boat that will carry you on, your sandals leaving prints that fill almost before the heel lifts. You look once more at the house where the cat vanished, and you wish the cat good dreams in whatever quiet pocket it finds. Then, because a joke will keep your shoulders loose, you tell yourself you will leave a 5-star review of the island's hospitality, great views, warm baths, slightly ashy turn-down service. You smile, and the ash records that too, briefly, before taking it back. You head for the pier, which is a polite word for stones that have decided to act like a pier. The air cools by a small degree. A breeze tests its courage and then commits. Your breath lengthens to meet it. Behind you, a mountain rearranges its furniture. Ahead of you, the open water resets its metronome. You place your palm on the rail of the waiting boat and feel the wood answer, a familiar dialect. The world closes a drawer softly. You don't look for the drawer again. You trust it's where it needs to be. Columns rise from the harbor mist like very polite trees, and the ship slides into Alexandria on a breath so steady it might have studied with your Athens donkeys. The lighthouse, the Pharos, blinks its stone eyelid at you, a calm guardian of arrivals. And you make a note to be that composed someday when strangers trundle into your kitchen. Lanterns tremble along the quay. Yes, that same little ripple your lamp loves to practice. And then the city receives you with cool shade and the smell of fresh mortar, ink, and brine. You pad from sun to shadow, from shadow to a doorway, where the air turns library cool, a drink of stone after the harbor's salt. Inside, reed pens scratch like crickets with good posture. A lazy cat specializes in yawning next to oil lamps, which is either a job or a performance art piece. Your sandals whisper across a floor worn by thousands of quiet errands, scholars fetching, scribes returning, apprentices learning how to carry 3 scrolls in one hand, like a waiter with cups. The columns hold the ceiling as if it were a thought. You let your breath match the building's slow exhale and feel your shoulders release a knot the helmsman would still rate ambitious. This is your anchor fact tonight. The famed library belongs to Alexandria's Mausion, founded under the early Ptolemies in the 3rd century BCE, a royal project to collect the world on papyrus. You could point to names and let them parade softly past Callimachus, who composed the Pinnaces, a vast catalog of authors and works, Eratosthenes, who measured the earth with a stick, a well, and an elegant mind, gatherings of translators shaping the Greek version, later called the Septuagint. Scrolls wear titles on their dowels like tiny crowns. In one room, a tutor murmurs Homer. In another, a physician compares notes about a herb that looks like dill but does not taste like dill. A classic identity crisis. You drift to a long table where a scribe mends a torn roll with paste that smells faintly of flour. The scratch of the pen is the library's metronome, your donkey's clop turned to ink. On a shelf, brittle edges flake like sea salt. You think of the ash that kissed your eyelashes on Thera and understand a new way of vanishing. Not fire, not wave, but time and touch, air and damp. The Nile's own breath loosening fibers worked by patient hands. You picture a line of copies receding, each a little more faded, like a chorus of echoes down a hallway. A librarian walks past with the gentle authority of a cat who has read your diary. You give a small, respectful smile and resist asking about a papyrus decimal system because you are proud of your restraint and because jokes must be portioned. Like olives, which you again do not steal, although a dish of them sits temptingly beside the ink. The librarian pauses to adjust a window shutter. A breeze rolls in, herb-scented, and somewhere far out on the eastern harbor, a bell. Your old companion seems to give one polite note, or you imagine it, and either way, the room approves. Baskets arrive from the quay. Customs here is peculiar in a way that pleases your sense of order. Officials borrow the books from ships, copy them, and return the copies while keeping the originals for the royal shelves. Ancient sources love to tell that story. You let it sit as a practiced routine rather than a scandal. The copies are good. The originals are safer here. Or so everyone says, before history has its laugh. A less attested rumor sidles in some say a few precious scrolls were sealed in clay jars against the Nile's damp, tucked in cellars near the Serapeum. Later generations insist they were found by a mason who mistook them for amphorae of oil and was tragically disappointed at dinner. Charming, unverified, you label it, and yet you can almost smell wet clay in the cool hall. The cat takes a new position, precisely where a sunbeam lands. You congratulate its scholarship and accept its purr as peer review. A young copyist in blue linen tests a fresh pen on the margin with a line of tiny waves that look suspiciously like your lamplight ripple. Ripple then sets to work on a medical text. You lean in just enough to catch the odor of gum arabic, dust, and leaf. It's soothing, like a forest that learned to whisper indoors. Historians still argue whether the great losses to this library came mainly during Julius Caesar's Alexandrian War in 48 BCE, when fires leapt from the harbor to nearby storehouses, or whether later centuries did the deeper erasing accidents. Neglect, budget, zealotry, earthquakes that rattled shelves and patience alike. They also argue, with reasonable exasperation, about numbers. Were there hundreds of thousands of scrolls, or only tens? Did the main collection fade, while the Serapeum's daughter library endured until a late, brutal closure? You let the debates move like a soft wind between stacks. They're part of the room's weather, not a storm you need to chase. A scholar unfolds a map, coastlines hatched in careful brown, and for a breath, you are back at your own map in your own lamplight, tracing freckles of islands as the fan rehearsed its ocean impression. The callback lands with a soft click, like the closing of a cabinet. You touch the table with 2 fingers and think of cabinets inside cabinets, the maybe cupboard where you keep the mariner's chime, the cinnamon wind, the Plato sketch, and now the jarred scrolls. The library itself is a larger, maybe so celebrated, so missing, reconstructed from testimonies like silhouettes cut from evening paper. You wander into a courtyard where ivy behaves itself, and a fountain makes patient geometry. 2 scholars argue amiably about a list of stars. One insists on catalog order by brightness. The other, by mythic significance. Orion gets front row because he is dramatic. You appreciate both sides and contribute nothing except a smile designed for scholarly climates. For your second soft joke, you consider founding a new field, cat-assisted cataloging, and decide it would thrive. On a bench, someone naps with a scroll tinting their chest, the words rising and falling as they breathe. You envy their skill. You notice, too, how the library tames noise but not life. A sandal scuffs, a pen pauses, someone laughs once, exactly the way that grandmother laughed while tying a jar onto a donkey in Akrotiri. You feel that laugh thread you to them across ash and water. The world keeps its own pinocchies in your head, tiny index cards reading faintly. Jar, donkey, laugh, lamp, ripple, olive, bell, maybe. A clerk brings a tray of lamps and sets them down with reverence. The oil smells faintly of crushed olives and clean wool, the Athens wax mingling with Nile light. 2 rooms folding into each other like sheets again. You lose a minute to the flame's calm sway and return carrying a small glow inside your ribs. If libraries could hiccup, you think it would sound like the smallest bell from a drowned plaza there, then gone because even a hiccup here would be civilized. A whispery legend nestles beside your elbow as you pass another shelf. Certain nights, they say, if a scribe falls asleep mid-copy, the unread words slip off the page and curl up like cats beside the lamp. In the morning, they climb back obediently onto the line, but leave paw prints of smudged ink. You look around. You do. In fact, see one small smudge shaped like a paw. Charming. Unverified. You let it purr in your pocket. You sit, finally, and handle a practice roll. Nothing precious. just clean columns of letters marching downhill. The steady fact, quietly, papyrus is a river plant sliced, crossed, pressed, and dried, a material resilient in desert cupboards, but vulnerable in damp. A city whose breath is sea and Nile must fight for every word it keeps. Somewhere beneath this very district, later centuries will give up statues and stones to divers. Whole palaces sleeping in green light. You feel the floor under your feet and imagine Silt as a librarian, meticulous and slow, filing whole rooms into the long archive called seabed. You close your eyes and listen for the thread that runs through tonight's rooms, the oarlocks thocking, the ash whispering, the reed pens scratching the world, keeping time, then erasing the beats, then keeping time again. When you open them, the cat is staring at you with the curiosity of a creature who knows you need one more joke quota. So you think if you whisper shh in Greek, it probably sounds exactly like shh. You try it. The cat approves. A bell from the harbor carries in. Just one note, true as a horizon. You stand, thank the columns for their posture, and leave the room with a promise you keep making to look softly at vanishings, to feel the cool on your skin, to respect the work ink does before it becomes dust. Outside, the light is warmer, the street fuller. A boy balances a stack of empty baskets and a very full cat. Both regard you as staff. You accept the promotion and step back into Alexandria's hum. Beads of hot sun on your forearms. A pocket quietly heavy with words that may or may not outlast the weather. You step into night that smells like wet pine meeting brine, and the ground under your sandals has that uncertain, pudding soft give that makes your ankles whisper, "Be gentle." Frogs and distant surf share a single breath, croak, hush, croak. Hush, like your Athens donkeys became an orchestra and learned amphibian. Reed beds shiver with each invisible exhale. Somewhere in the dark, a wooden gate clicks once, polite as a librarian adjusting a latch, and you can almost see your lamp's old ripple playing across the marsh. A pocket of light pretending to be a tide. You are in a low plain where rivers wander toward the Corinthian Gulf. And here, the earth remembers too well what water can do to certainty. Pains bead the air with resin. The sea salts it. The mix is a sleepy cologne eau d'ancien coastline that you would absolutely buy if the bottle promised notes of history and civilized panic. You stand still and let the ground's message travel up your calves. It says, I am many things, but tonight I am not a floor. You listen, the way you did on deck when the oarlocks thocked and fell quiet, and a name pads out of the reeds without needing to be announced. Helike. Your steady fact arrives with it and sets down a small lamp in your mind. In the winter of 373 BCE, ancient writers say this city and nearby towns shook through foreshocks, and then, in a violent night, subsided and drowned. Seawater rushed in. The morning found the place where streets had been turned to lagoon. Later travelers like Pausanias are clear that for years after, people pointed from the shore to the place of Helike underwater. The story has good posture. It does not need to raise its voice. You look toward the dark bowl of the Gulf and feel a slow recoil, as if the sea itself is remembering its sprint and deciding not to do it again in front of guests. Pines click. A dog, somewhere, contributes one measured remark, and then retires. You place your palm on a pine trunk, and the bark holds a coolness like a clay cup touched by dawn. Under your palm, the ground gives a smaller echo, a low syllable of mud. The body learns new grammar quickly, how to bend knees, how to truss reeds, how to place a step, as if the earth is a friend you don't want to wake. People told the tale this way for a long time. The city vanished into the sea. Fishermen cast nets over paved streets. In clear weather, columns could be seen. A less attested flourish adds small sounds on windless nights. The water carried a faint metallic clink, as if some bronze in a drowned portico remembered how to ring. You file it in the maybe cabinet with your mariner's bell and cinnamon wind charming, unverified, and notice how the reeds themselves make a tiny chiming when a breeze threads them just right. If myths are playlists, the marsh is on theme. A coin glints in your thought, the steady kind, not the shimmering kind, and you picture the Helike mint's favorite design, Poseidon with his trident, the sea god who shakes the earth as confidently as a helmsman taps the tiller twice for luck. Those coins turn up in hands far from this shore, the way Melian obsidian once turned up far from Melos. Trade is a long memory, and metal is a decent archivist. You imagine one coin lying somewhere under your toes, varnished with silt, patient as a cat in a sunbeam. Yes, you are still thinking of that Alexandria cat. Yes, you accept that your personal pantheon now includes Poseidon and a librarian's mouser. The frogs take 5 and then return for the cadenza. You rate the soloist enthusiastic, needs editing, which is your first gentle joke for the evening. Nature declines to be offended. You breathe in the resin again, taste the salt, and let the marsh teach you its physics. The word you need is liquefaction, soil so soaked and shaken it forgets how to hold itself together. Imagine a field becoming a slow, grim jelly. Do not recommend it for dessert. In your brain, the concept clicks together with the way your blanket swished like beach sand on night 1 and the way the ash on Thera turned steps into slopes. The planet's housekeeping. Remember, many tools. One tidy impulse. You walk, slowly, toward a low rise that pretends to be confident. A cricket chirps from somewhere that sounds exactly like Mind the Step, which you do. In the reeds, the breeze prints little barcodes. A heron lifts and becomes a slightly ghostly piece of punctuation against the star's comma or parenthesis. You can't tell. Either way, you feel yourself lean into the pause. Historians still argue whether this sudden ruin fed the Atlantis tale that Plato was polishing not long after the night Helike went under, or whether that link is wishful hindsight stitched from proximity and poetry. You don't adjudicate. You let possibility and caution sit side by side like olives you still haven't stolen and a pen you promise not to touch. It's enough that conversations remember the outline: a city proud, a night severe, a morning of water where streets had been. You look at the reeds and see the shape that absence can wear. The phrase sank twice joins you like a guide with a lantern. Once, Helike sank into sea and quickened mud, the first vanishing embroidered by witnesses who watched the gulf swallow roofs. Then, over centuries, the rivers wandered and refilled the wound. The lagoon silted. What had been seafloor grew a new skin of meadow and marsh. The city disappeared again, this time into earth. tucked under fields where frogs apply for choir and pines lace the air. People walked and planted above a rumor. A second drawer closed softly. You respect the craftsmanship. You crouch and pinch a bit of mud, the way a potter might test a wheel's readiness. The mud is cool and reluctance itself. It keeps your fingerprint for a heartbeat and then lets it go. You recall the clay jars in Alexandria, the smudge shaped like a paw, and the way the cat's purr scored the air like a marginal note. Here the margin is wide reeds, frogs, your breath, the patient horizon. If you had a ruler, you could measure the quiet in inches. On a hummock, someone has left a small timber-weathered gray, as if rehearsing for driftwood. You sit on it and watch the gulf go dark to darker, colors sliding like pages. The frogs, having finished their cadenza, settle into agreeable accompaniment. You contribute the kind of joke that keeps you human and awake in a sleepy way. If ancient city planning apps had an alert for ground behaves like soup, fewer temples would list basement flooded under maintenance issues. The reeds do not laugh. They are busy practicing wind instruments. The steady fact tilts its lamp again to keep you honest modern excavations, guided by old texts and new patience, have found layers of settlement and the signatures of quake and flood in this plain roads, workshops, small sanctuaries. The pieces do not leap up shouting, but they align like stars when you remember what to look for. Archaeology here is not treasure chest drama. It is the slow reading of mud. It's a kind of lullaby for the impatient, and you find it suits tonight's tempo. You let your mind tip back to the ship's deck salt on your sleeve, a gull's surprised baby cry, and forward to the ash that kissed your lashes on Thera. The callback braid is deliberate. You want your footsteps to rhyme. A city can be a cliff of painted dolphins. It can be a room of papyrus. It can be a reed bed, fine-tuning its choir. The world keeps teaching the same lesson with different instruments. And you, patient student with ambitious shoelace certification, keep taking notes with your nose and ears. A breeze comes across the gulf, tasting faintly of iron and dusk. It folds your shirt against your ribs and then forgets you, the way waves forget wakes. You think, briefly, about keeping a tally lamp ripples many, bells, real and imagined several, jokes that deserve detention at least one per section. You decide to let the tally go. Librarians have that handled. Instead, you collect a single smooth fact to hold like a pebble in a pocket. Coins of Poseidon from Helike traveled, stories about Helike traveled, and you, with your soft shoes and softer attention, are traveling through the spaces those things left. Somewhere behind you, a path leads back to higher ground and the neat geometry of a road. You'll take it soon. For the moment you add one last small joke to your own inventory, you are now a person who can say liquefaction in a whispery ASMR voice and feel oddly proud, which is not a credential you plan to earn. But here we are. The frogs approve with thunderous applause, which, in their language, sounds exactly like frogs. When you stand, the hummock remembers your wait for a breath and then forgets it. You brush your palms and smell pine on your skin, salt on your knuckles. The marsh floor gives one final tremor, not alarm, just a reminder of its undecided nature, and the surf answers from far off with the calmest hush. You step carefully, reeds parting, feet placing, ankle listening. The night is a book that refuses to be read loudly. You accept the terms. The little gate clicks again as you pass it. You think of the Critias breaking off mid-sentence, of the way water finishes a thought without words, and you let the unfinished be the point. Ahead, a pin of lamplight waits at a house that has learned to float on wooden piles, a sensible compromise between land and sea. The light does its old ripple trick on the threshold stones, and you smile at the continuity of small things. You will sleep above a plain that holds a city twice hidden. In the morning, there will be herons on posts, and, if you are lucky, a coin glinting in furrowed earth where someone turned soil for olives. You will not take the coin. You will take the lesson how to vanish kindly and how to listen for the hinge when the drawer closes. You follow the night north until dawn smells different, less pine and brine, more salt over meadow, a sweetness like tea brewed from old leaves. Shallow waves tap your shins as if testing the hem of your patience, and Pete breathes up the low, shy perfume of long-pressed plants. You step forward, and your toes meet a water-smooth stump, solid as a handshake. Slick as glass, and a little ring ripples outward, doing the same trick your lamp loves to do on your blanket, only colder. Beyond you, gulls take attendance one by one, and the tide says present in a metronome more spacious than your Athens donkeys, but with the same polite rhythm. You are wading where a country used to be. Wind combs the surface into pale lines, and each line feels like the underlining of a sentence the sea really wants you to read slow. In the shallows lie the bones of a forest roots gripping sand as if still determined, trunks cut short by time's careful saw. The peat's sweetness carries a hint of smoke you can't see, and for a moment you taste the Thera ash that kissed your eyelashes, the way memories of one vanishing kindly loan warmth to another. You crouch and lay a palm on the stump. It's cool and grooved, like a record underwater, playing a song you can hear with your fingertips. Your steady fact stands up here with the confidence of a post driven deep during the Mesolithic. The North Sea was not wholly sea. A wide lowland later called Doggerland connected the chalk of Britain to the dunes and rivers of the continent, a landscape of marsh and lake and herds and people walking where you now wade. Fishermen and trawlers have pulled up proof for generations: antler picks, harpoons, worked flints, bones of elk and mammoth, and in the late 20th and early 21st centuries, seismic surveys mapping the seabed for oil revealed ghost rivers and sandbars in astonishing detail, like a city map pressed into a dark page. You do not recite this like a textbook. You feel it in your calves, learning the grammar of drowned grass. A cormorant rises dripping and rearranges itself into a very serious statue on a pole. You adjust your borrowed boots' shoelace certification, still ambitious, though the boots mercifully zip and take 2 careful steps toward a line of darker water, your socks, which expected a desk job tonight. Register a formal complaint that you decline to process. That's your first soft joke. The sea accepts it and continues being the sea. A breeze brings a little iodine, a little iron. Your mouth tightens and then relaxes. the way it did when the sulfur of Santorini tried out a new cologne. Between wavelets, you see the plain as it was because the water tells you there, a low ridge that would have been dry path. There, the pale smear of an ancient channel, unscrolling toward a bigger river. A dog barks from a distant beach and sounds surprised, as if it has also just imagined deer stepping from reed to reed. The stump under your hand remembers shade. Your wrist remembers sun. You let both memories sit together, the way you let olive and ink share the air over Plato's table. Historians still argue whether a single disaster finished the drowning, an enormous tsunami triggered by the Storega submarine slide off Norway around 200 years ago, or whether the slow, century-on-century rise of meltwater had already thinned the human presence to scattered camps by then, with the big wave only adding an abrupt signature. They also discuss whether places like the Dogger Bank persisted as islands with late, lonely hearths, or yielded earlier to the advancing brine. You do not referee. You listen for how the arguments are also kinds of weather, moving over the same ground with different clouds. A less attested tale flutters down the coast to join you when onshore gales rake the Suffolk cliffs. Some locals say you can still hear bells from the drowned streets of Dunwich, once a busy town, now mostly sipped away by storms. Charming, unverified. You label it, though you can't help noticing how the wind hums over the hollow of your ear like a bottle's mouth, and how easy it is to imagine bronze remembering its old job for a second. Your drowned plaza chime from earlier keeps you company like a pocket-sized superstition. You let it. And the air warms 1 degree. You walk farther, and the meadow under the sea introduces itself by texture yielding, then springy, sandy, then gummy, a small surprise every meter, like a conversation with a very polite stranger who keeps changing hats. A fragment of peat floats past, feather light, and bumps your calf with the apologetic insistence of a cat. Yes, Alexandria's critic has followed you across miles as a manner of thought. You imagine the peat as time's pantry slices of summer stacked and pressed, releasing a smell like sweet tea from the land's old picnic. The second of tonight's gentle jokes occurs to you when a wave slips into your boot and becomes a roommate. You decide to call it North Sea Intern. Explain that its tasks include cooling ankles and archival research, and promise a letter of recommendation. The tide, which has seen worse metaphors, approves with a small clap against your shin. Out beyond the sandbar, a seal surfaces with the baffled dignity of someone who expected fewer humans in borrowed boots. You nod as if to an elder at the library door. The main stream lives easily with the fringe here. A trawler far off leans and steadies. You picture its nets bringing up a worked flint that still fits a palm, and a crewman, practical to the bone, setting it in a cup holder beside a thermos. A pub later will examine it with the same care an academy student gave a reed pen. Someone will say their grandfather pulled up a mammoth tooth the year the engine was rebuilt and kept it on a shelf over the television, and everyone will nod as if mammoth teeth and soap operas are natural roommates. The shelf, you think, is a small museum of continuity. You pause and close your eyes. Inside the hush, you can almost hear the Aegean oarlocks thawking. then the reed pens scratching, then the frogs and the distant surf taking turns. The night in the marsh near Helike smelled of resin and brine. Here dawn smells of salt and meadow breath. You braid the moments deliberately, a callback rope that makes your footing surer. The stump is a post in two worlds, wood and water, and you lean on it lightly, keeping your promise not to puncture, only to listen. A gull performs a tidy theft of someone's unattended sandwich down the beach, and you applaud the gull's professional development with a private smile. You add the third soft joke to your internal ledger. If there had been a Mesolithic app store, the top download would have been, "Where did I leave my Camp Tide-Aware edition?" free with optional whale song notifications. The cormorant declines comment, which is fair. You sit on a drowned log, barely clearing the chop, and watch the surface scribble and erase. The tide writes, the tide edits. We are all drafts. The steady fact touches your shoulder again. People lived here. They cooked shellfish, followed herds, looked up at migrating birds, watched weather cross a horizon now underwater. The world kept their notes in peat and clay and silt, set them on a shelf 10 fathoms down, and labeled the drawer with a current. Even now, you can read a few lines, a pollen grain from birch, a trace of hazel, a ripple like handwriting. The archive is intact enough to be gentle. A low hum arrives, not a bell, just a ship's diesel carrying across water like faraway bees. It reminds you of the humming globe you will hold later in a quiet lab. But that's a thought for another room. For now, a child on the beach shouts triumphantly and raises a black lump the size of a fistpeat, soaked, declaring it cake. You approve the ambition, suggest moderation, and watch the lump crumble back into the sea with the softest sigh. Vanishing here is not dramatic. It is housekeeping with excellent manners. You look down and see that the ripple you made at first touch has come back around as a wider ring. It reaches your knees, takes your temperature, and passes on. You picture the ring traveling, picking up details from every stump and shell bell, paw smudge, cinnamon wind, ambitious knot, and delivering them to someone miles away who will feel their own knee cool and think, inexplicably, of libraries. The sea is good at passing notes in class. When you stand, the boot gives one last persuasive argument for sitting, which you overrule with kindness. The stump under your palm does its final good impression of a dry land friend, then glosses back to reflective. You walk toward shore the way you walked the marsh at Helike knee soft, ankle listening, letting the world keep its drawers. At the rack line, a feather lies scripted onto the sand, and you decide not to pick it up because some things are better as punctuation. Back on the beach, you unsleeve your feet and pour a modest North Sea from each boot. The intern takes its unpaid leave. You tie the ambitious knot again because traditions matter, and the knot, heroically, works well enough to get you to the towel. Behind you, the meadow under the water goes on being meadowish reeds you can't see, paths that have learned to lie flat, a story that has chosen a slower voice. You taste the last of the peat sweet, let your shoulders drop, and carry forward the lesson stamped into your souls. Some vanishings are not sudden. They are the gentlest of edits, written in water with a hand so patient You only noticed the meaning when you wade. You drift face down over turquoise so clear it feels like light has turned to water and decided to practice being gentle. The surface folds and unfolds above your back in a thin, warm sheet. Your breath moves through the snorkel like a small seaside train. Comically dignified. A sea kazoo that tells the fish where you are and that you come in peace. Below, a path of pale blocks steps away into the green-blue hush, each slab trimmed by waves into honeycombs that catch the sun and return it to your eyes in soft, salted squares. Your fingertips graze a corner and feel a warmth the water hasn't stolen yet. The sun still reaching this shallow stage with lazy confidence. A parrotfish sidles over, lacquered in blues and pinks, and clicks at your mask as if taking notes on your technique. Each nip on the limestone sings tiny porcelain sounds tick, tick like very polite carpentry. Another glides past, mouth busy, turning reef into future beach. Your flippers whisper over sand ripples, and you remember the marsh near Helike, where the ground forgot how to be ground, and the North Sea, where your boot earned an underpaid intern. Here, the tide is the same careful editor, smoothing your wake before you realize you left one, erasing your signature with immaculate manners. Above, the boat taps its hull in a slow rhythm clonk. Clonk, the Aegean oarlock's cousin, your Athens donkey's great-grandchild, keeping time for the day. You follow the pale trail as it arcs, doglegs, and fades. A lace of stone just 5 or 6 breaths below your chest. This is your steady fact, the one you hold still in your mind like a coin on a thumb off North Bimini. Divers in the late 1960s began describing an underwater formation of broad, flat limestone blocks, often called the Bimini Road, laid end-to-end for dozens of meters in 2 and sometimes 3 offset lines. Most geologists who have come here with clipboards and friendly skepticism see naturally fractured beach rock, cracked by stresses, pried by waves, and planed by currents into these deceptively tidy rectangles. The sea loves a right angle now and then. It's one of its party tricks. You feel along a seam and tap a fingertip into a pore where tiny clams have made apartments. The block's edge is scalloped like pastry. Your stomach thinks about snacks and then remembers your snorkel is not a straw. That's your first soft joke, and the fish roll their eyes as one. In the near distance, a nurse shark naps under a ledge, hugging the sand like a cat that has mastered library etiquette. You keep your flippers polite and let the shark's stillness teach you how to float quieter. A breeze negotiates small diamonds across the surface. Sun coins scatter and gather. You think of the Helike mint and its tridents, Poseidon looking very composed on bronze, and you imagine tossing a coin here and watching it vanish between the slabs, filed instantly by the tide into a drawer you will never open. The drawer closes softly. You approve the craftsmanship. A school of silversides turns like a single thought and threads the gaps. Each fish a comma, the group a sentence, the whole punctuation shimmering into clarity and then dissolving. This road, if road it is, knows how to take a compliment from light. Historians still argue whether this formation is entirely natural beach rock, or if human hands once straightened, stacked, or reworked parts of it into a slipway or harbor wall. The arguments are patient, not angry measurements of jointing patterns, surveys of bedding planes. The way blocks step down as if following an old shoreline. You do not referee. You let your breath be the metronome and watch how debate can move softly through clear water, the way those silversides do, turning together without collision. The lesser attested deeps drift over you like a cloud in the 20th century. A famous American trance reader, Edgar Cayce, predicted Atlantis would rise near Bimini around 1968 or 1969, and believers later smiled at the timing of divers first mapping this place. You label the tale the way you label your drowned plaza belle and cinnamon wind charming, unverified, a mood that inflects the color of the water without changing its chemistry. Locals will add their own small wonders. That night divers sometimes see slow orbs of pale light wafting along the stones, Bimini fireflies, or that compasses twitch near the formation on days when the tide has strong opinions. You keep these in your maybe cabinet and return your attention to the block under your palm, which offers strictly the facts of touch: warm, rough, pocked with tiny rooms. A ray lifts like a carpet given a careful shake, sand spilling glitter behind it. You laugh a quiet hello into your snorkel. For joke number 2, you congratulate yourself on tying your mask strap with your signature ambitious shoelace knot. The ocean accepts your confidence and declines to test it just now. Your shoulders loosen by one tight thread, the way they did in Alexandria when the oil lamps breathed olive and wool into the cool. Even here, a ripple on sand imitates your first night's lamplight, a miniature shoreline playing across the bottom of your vision. The world loves a motif. You trail the line and find where it stutters under tossed coral and slips under a tongue of clean sand. In the next opening, 2 slabs stack with such straight faces that you feel unfairly, as if you've been tricked into architecture. Your fingertips read the seam and find only see no mortar, no tool mark you can trust. You think about how Plato's story broke off mid-sentence and left the room listening to what wasn't there. The ocean here seems to admire that editing and keeps the ending under a soft layer of unhelpful perfection. You nod at the craft and float on. Between breaths, your throat tastes a trace of iodine and sunblock, an oddly domestic flavor. A cloud passes. The light dims for a heartbeat and then returns, richer, an underwater echo of the curtain at home, lifting on the fan's breath. You hear the click of parrotfish, again tick-tick, ever the meticulous carpenters. And consider joke number 3, if fish had HR. Parrotfish would file for carpentry hazard pay and receive instead a polite email and a commemorative t-shirt. The parrotfish incline their heads as if they have seen worse humor printed on beach towels. You roll to float on your back, your ears dunked just enough to lower the world's volume to a blanket fort hush. The boat thunks its soft clonk again. Above, clouds slide like sleeves being rolled down. You think of the North Sea ring coming back around to your knees and wonder which of your ripples will find the Doggerland meadow, or the marsh at Helike, or Plato's table in some gentle quantum sense that physicists would remind you is not how things work. And you would agree and keep the picture anyway, because it helps you breathe slower. Turning face down again, you find where the stones thin and the road becomes suggestion. Sand takes over, ridged like satin. A barracuda hovers with the stillness of a no-nonsense librarian, and you choose, for relationship health, to browse elsewhere. Over a pale hollow, your shadow joins you, and together you pass a patch of turtle grass where a juvenile turtle is describing circles the way a student describes an argument, sincere and a little lopsided. You salute with 2 fingers and move on. The steady fact taps your shoulder once more. Beach rock forms when carbonate sands on a beach cement in place. Later, surf undercuts, waves pry, slabs break free, and gravity arranges them in polite rows, almost but not quite architectural. The eye loves order, the mind loves story. The sea loves to nudge us with both. You accept the nudge and let the story be a whisper, not a verdict. Of all the ways places disappear, this might be the kindest erosion that leaves a drawing of itself on the seafloor, like chalk lines where a table used to stand. A conch shell sits in a nook between 2 blocks, pink mouth turned away, shy. You resist the tourist spell to pick it up and put it to your ear. There is already ocean in your ear, and it is doing perfectly well without props. You touch the shell's lip with 1 knuckle instead and feel the smooth curve slide under your skin like a practiced note. Far off, a motor rises and falls. A gull drops a complaint into the air and moves on. You are, for a surprisingly complete moment, exactly the right size for your surroundings. When you finally kick toward the boat, the road tapers under your belly into glimmers, and then nothing. Sand takes your shadow. The nurse shark has not moved. The parrotfish have filed their reports. The barracuda has stamped your card with a look that says quietly, you surface into the bright and blow your snorkel clear with a small trumpet that would make the Athens donkeys pause appreciatively. The world smells like warm salt and sunscreen. Your mouth tastes of laughing. In the boat, your towel remembers your shape and finishes the job the sun started. You look back down and see only your reflection and a quilt of moving squares. Bimini swings a palm fringe against the sky, and someone on shore lifts a conch horn in an evening call. The note is long and soft, like the bell you've been hearing in drowned plazas that may or may not exist, like the single harbor tone that reached the library hall. You let the note settle into your ribs and think some roads lead forward, some roads lead downward, some roads are only the ocean practicing geometry and letting us overhear. You promise the sea as you promised the map, the papyrus, the marsh that you won't puncture. Only listen. The boat answers with 1 friendly clonk. You sit, the towel a small warm Alexandria, the air sweet as meadow tea, the stones below keeping their tidal secret. If there was a city here, it has learned discretion. If there was only a shore, it has learned how to draw. Either way, the lesson is the same, and you carry it lightly as you reach for the ladder. Rung disappearance can be orderly, can be kind, can leave a path made of edges that the water keeps smoothing, inviting fingertips and soft eyes and unambitious knots. You taste grit on your lips as a dry wind combs a stone circle so wide the horizon seems to blink. The sand is the color of toasted bread you did not make because the desert does not offer a kitchen, only a vast, patient dining table for light. Under your boots, the rock is ribbed and clean, each ridge like a frozen wave. Your breath finds the same unhurried metronome the donkeys kept in Athens, only now the drummer is the harmattan. tapping your sleeve with powdered glass. You crest a low rim, and the world opens into rings within rings, ripples in rock that march outward for miles. The memory of your lamp's little puddle of light nips at your heel. There it is again. The ripple-made landscape, a halo pressed into stone. The air smells faintly of iron and baked dust, a scent that politely clears its throat and says water was here once, a long time ago, and left these neat lines as a forwarding address. You put your palm to the quartzite and feel day's heat lingering like a compliment. This is your steady fact. You're standing at the Risha structure, often called the Eye of the Sahara, a deeply eroded geologic dome in Mauritania about 40-plus kilometers across. It was first suspected to be a meteor impact, but studies found no shock features in the rocks. The consensus now is uplift and erosion layers bulged up, then weather pared them into concentric ridges, the harder bed standing proud while the softer weathered away. From space, astronauts use it the way sailors use a lighthouse. Down here, it feels like the desert practiced drawing circles until it got very, very good. You walk the curve of a ridge, and the wind writes a steady shh across the stone. Librarian air moving through a shelf of rock. The path underfoot is crisp, free of the squish and sway you learn to respect at Helike and Doggerland. This is not a vanishing in progress, but a record of vanishings completed. File stamped by sun. The stone wears desert varnish, a thin polish of time that catches light in bronze hints. You imagine a copyist from Alexandria running a careful finger over this line, nodding at the clarity of the layout. Historians still argue whether patterns like these, so eerily similar to a ringed city, have anything at all to do with the stories that grew along coasts far away. Some wonder aloud whether later readers, hungry for coordinates, retrofitted these rings into their map of lost places. Others point out impatiently that this is inland, arid, and geologically minded, not a drowned harbor. They also debate whether Bronze Age travelers crossed this plateau in numbers that could have carried a tale outward, or whether these stones kept their own counsel while trade threaded different ways. You let the wind hold the argument. It's good at both sides. A less attested anecdote walks in with a caravan of rumor and sets down a brass tray of possibilities. Some guides say compasses jitter near certain ridges on still days, as if the circle prefers you to find your way by sky. Others swear the eye hums at night when the wind slips perfectly across the arcs, a note too low to hear, only felt in ribs. A cousin to your drowned plaza bell. You label the tray charming, unverified, steal nothing but the image of starlight flowing around a curve and pooling in a hollow, and keep moving at a pace that does not disturb the varnish. You tow a pebble, and it rattles 3 times down a groove, like a very small donkey working a very tiny shift. It's satisfying. For your first soft joke, you consider proposing a desert app called Find My Ring Geology Edition, with alerts whenever you accidentally wander out of concentric alignment. You decide the winds have notified you enough for one day. A beetle trudges past with the fatalism of a scholar heading to a long panel on chronology, and you salute its commitment to timelines. You climb to a higher band, and the rings rearrange in your perspective, each arc sliding into the next like nested bowls. The light is granular, the heat rises in penciled strokes. It smells faintly of flint. You remember the Bimini slabs, the way rectangles pretended to be a road, and you savor the symmetry there. The ocean drew straight lines and invited you to imagine a harbor. Here, the desert draws circles and tempts you toward a city that never pretends to be wet. Different mediums, same patient prankster energy. Somewhere behind the ridge, a tuft of dry grass snags your shoelace. You perform your now traditional ambitious knot rescue, and for joke number 2, you award yourself a merit badge in field knot theory, embroidered with a tiny beetle and a very judgmental parrotfish. The wind, for its part, continues its shh, which you accept as both encouragement and critique. You taste a grain of sand that has upgraded itself to seasoning and resolved to drink water soon. You slide your fingertips along a bedding plane, tracing the fine laminations that look like pages glued and tilted. The structure's inner rings glow paler, chalk and sandstone. The outer ridges steel themselves into tougher browns. You picture rain, once caught here, pooling in a temporary eye after rare storms. And for a breath, the place smells like memory-softened wet stone, surprised dirt. Then the dry returns, generous and exacting, and you listen to how silence here is less empty than precise. Your third joke arrives carrying a canteen and an apology. If you were a high school geometry teacher, you would bring your class here and say, "Class, this is what happens when circles drop out of school and join a rock band," and the class would groan and remember it forever. The wind, which has heard worse, turns a page of air. The beetle, unmoved, continues. For all the desert's seriousness, there are signatures of passing lives. A scrap of woven fiber lies tucked in a shadow, maybe the fringe of an old camel blanket. A tiny hearth circle, long cold, rings a palm's worth of soot. You think of coins bearing Poseidon found far from Helike, of flints in trawlers' nets from Doggerland, of jars and paw smudges in Alexandria. Here, the archive is spare, pocket-sized, written in fire and thread. It suits the eye's aesthetic minimal, but pointed. You rest in the lee of a ridge and let your breathing slow until it matches the desert's preferred tempo. Long inhale, longer exhale, a thoughtful pause. You remember the cinnamon wind rumor from Santorini and smile at how your nose keeps a playlist. Here, the scent is all brass and biscuit and a whisper of stone warmed past argument. The sky is a pale bowl. A hawk writes a narrow cursive high above and dots it with a dive you can only follow with your ears. The steady fact taps your shoulder again with a dry, competent finger. The eye exposes rocks from multiple eras, stacked and uplifted old cores ringed by younger beds, and wind and water did the carving. No crates of bronze bull statues, no drowned avenues, no hidden key. And yet your mind refuses to ban wonder. It simply adjusts it. Instead of docking ships, you dock thoughts, concentric storms of geology passing through your pocket of time. You stand and walk another arc, and with each step, the rings do that optical slide, their edges aligning and unaligning. A strobe of concentricity. It makes you feel a little like you're in a very polite planetarium that has removed the chairs to encourage humility. Somewhere at the base of a ridge, the sand hisses like soda poured too slowly, and you swear, for half a heartbeat, You hear the bell again, one spare note, as if the eye blinks and the sound is the eyelash. Charming. Unverified. You let the sound go and keep the feeling. When you finally turn outward, the plain beyond the outermost band looks oddly undecorated, a page margin after a dense paragraph. You tuck a small, chalky pebble back where you found it, not to pocket, only to promise. And the wind smooths away your fingerprints as fast as you can make them. The desert has excellent housekeeping. You try a librarian's shh in reply, and it works better than you expect. Even the beetle pauses, which you take as a 5-star review. You walk down toward your camp, a stubborn patch of shade where a kettle argues itself toward tea. The rings behind you compress into a single curve, then into suggestion, then into the feeling of rings rather than the sight. It's the same fade you watched at Bimini when the road dissolved into sand, the same soft drawer you heard close over Helike's fields, the same ripple your lamp kept making on your blanket when all this began. You add the eye to that chorus and feel your shoulders lower a centimeter you didn't know they were holding. At the kettle, the tea tastes faintly of dust and mint, which is to say, perfect. You tilt the cup and watch the surface tighten, a miniature circle practicing what the big one preaches. Somewhere in the far, far blue, an astronaut looks down and says, "There," and you look up and say, "Here," and the desert, pleased, goes on blinking with the patience of stone. You unfurl a creaking chart on a swaying table, and the paper exhales the smell of linen and salt, as if it had been sunbathing under rigging before consenting to be a map. A lamp does its favorite ripple across the parchment. Yes, the same small tide that has followed you since the first night-turning compass roses into little pools of light. The table ticks in time with the hull, a distant cousin to your Athens donkeys keeping the night's metronome. A brass compass quivers on the margin. You tap its lid once and, for your first soft joke, ask if it needs coffee. It declines by trembling politely in place. Lines spill from the compass roses like silk thread, rums pointing every which way. A geometry of desire. Your fingertips trace one, then another, and you feel the world turn to chords and bearings. Steady fact, laid down like a straight edge, medieval and early modern mariners leaned on portolan charts, crisp with compass lines and coastal detail, their accuracy along the Mediterranean so uncanny that later scholars still blink later. In 1569, Mercator stretches the globe into a projection that turns constant direction courses into straight lines navigation's gift, even if it makes Greenland look like it has been lifting weights. The ship sways, and the chart murmurs its creak again. You wait a curling corner with a smooth stone you pocketed near the eye of the Sahara, a circle keeping a sheet flat, and feel a miniature wind right across your knuckles. Coastlines wink and shift like rumors. A thumb-wide island west of Ireland stares up with one blank eye. High Brazil, the ink suggests, and your pulse does that curious double step it did when you first laid a palm on Bimini's warm stone. On centuries of maps, this round, bisected shape appears and disappears, sometimes a neat circle with a straight, sometimes a smudge, a promise you can almost taste. Historians still argue whether High Brazil grew from rare sightings of the porcupine bank, lifted into view by mirage. or from a legend with no rock under it at all, story first. Geology optional. They also play tug-of-war over eyewitness notes. Did captains chase a receding shore through bands of cloud and optical trickery? Or did they chase tradition because the map invited them to? You don't referee. You place one fingertip on the circle, feel the parchment warm there, and let the maybe cabinet click open in your head beside the drowned plaza bell and the cinnamon wind. The compass raps once, as if feeling left out. You pivot the chart and another island lounges into view. Frizzland, sprawled like a couch day, as if someone let a cat nap across the North Atlantic. It lives on the Zeno map and a few children of that map, and then it fades like a dream the afternoon forgets. Your librarian cat from Alexandria would approve this editorial process. You imagine a paw smudge on a scribe's atlas, and for a moment you can smell gum Arabic and warm wool. So real you look around for shelves, only the galley door, a kettle rehearsing a boil, a faint tar and rope perfume, a library gone to sea. Along the bottom edge of the chart, a tidy legend promises more than it can deliver. Here be well, almost never dragons. You remind yourself with a second steady fact. The famous phrase appears rarely. One Renaissance globe whispers a Latin cousin about serpents, but most map monsters arrive as decor, not threat, cheerful as the parrotfish carpenters ticking at your mask. You watch a sea lion inked beside a northern coast, grin like someone who has just stolen a sandwich, and decide it is an honest portrait. A gust lifts the chart's corner. Your ambitious knot graduates to cartographic duty as you lash the far edge to a belaying pin. That's gentle joke number 2. And the ship gives a tolerant creak. The way a helmsman nodded when your deck knot was promoted from abstract to serviceable. The lamp's ripple glides across a compass rose. The rose seems to breathe. Your breath lengthens to match. Outside, a bell from the forecastle offers one precise note. Your old friend then makes a show of minding its business. You steer your eye into warmer seas. A scalloped coast unfurls like ribbon, Africa stretched broad. The mountains of Kong marching where no mountain line actually holds the horizon. The Phantom Range will sit in atlases for a century, composed and wrong, and then it will leave as quietly as High Brazil, an erasure neat as a librarian's shh. You taste a dry grit on your lip and think of the eye again, its rings of weather, its patience. The table jumps. Your compass skates a centimeter and sulks. You turn to a different folio, younger paper biting your fingers like starched linen. A rectangle in the Pacific is crisply inked Sandy Island. You know how this ends. The steady fact sets its cup down with a soft click. Surveyors in our lifetime sailed those coordinates and found unbroken blue no shoal, no crown of coral, and absence so persuasive that charts and satellites let go in a rush. Little rectangles vanishing from screens like embarrassed stagehands. You enjoy the theater of it. The way a wrong thing can be tenderly escorted to the wings. Under your palm, the chart flakes a tiny salt at the edge, brittle like Alexandria's scroll ends. Like Doggerland peat in your boot, you pick it off. A respectful archiving, and place it beside your stone. The kettle in the galley does its small thunder. You hear in it The caldera's breath from Santorini softened to domestic scale. Mirages knock at the door of your attention heat, bending light until ships float upside down. Islands split in two. Coasts slide. Fata Morgana smears the horizon's handwriting, and mariners, earnest and tired, take dictation. A less attested anecdote unfurls like a whispered footnote, a late-night copyist. So the story goes. Once hid a tiny paper town on a publisher's map to catch plagiarists, agloe, and the map's fiction became real when a shop adopted the name. Cartography manifested a hamlet the way a lullaby can sometimes slow a heart. Charming, yes, and in this case not entirely unverified. Still, you shelve it with your other friendly gremlins and let the lamp warm the letters until they look like shy embers. The map smiles guilty in the lamplight, as if to confess that sometimes drawings talk back. You angle the chart toward the hinge of two oceans, and a little fan of notes crowds the margin Piri Reis. 1513, a stitched-together world in brown ink, coasts borrowed from earlier pilots, rumors of a farther south. Historians still argue whether his sources included sketches from Columbus or lost Portuguese portlands, whether that one long, low line is a dreamy Antarctica or just a stretched South America. The arguments, like the oarlocks you loved, thock back and forth. Tidy, rhythmic. You let them keep time while your eyes ride the coastline, past place names that sound like sleep talking. For gentle joke number 3, you whisper, recalculating, to a map that does not have a satellite to kiss. And the compass, ever dignified, replies by settling half a hair closer to north. The lamp line ripples. The ship mutters. Your shoulders drop a centimeter. You didn't know you were keeping up by your ears. You think of the gull's surprised baby cry, the donkey's patient clop, the frog chorus in the marsh, the soft clonk under Bimini, every place making its own metronome, every map pretending to hold the beat. You eye a smudge in the Western Ocean labeled Antillia, the Isle of 7 Cities, a refuge imagined so confidently that captains went looking with provisions and faith. The ink is dense, as if the cartographer pressed harder when he liked a dream. You set a thumb on the dream and hear, or think you hear, a bell ring once from some drowned square that could be Lisbon or someplace you invented for comfort. Charming, unverified. You smile into the lamp and let the note pass through you like a ray lifting sand. Around the edges of the paper, the air grows velvety with night. Someone opens the galley door. A ribbon of cinnamon from a cook's pocket of spice argues softly with tar and rope. Your Santorini rumor visiting in a friendlier form. You fold the chart on a diagonal your old scribes would approve no hard creases and slide it back into its sleeve. The brass compass finally relaxes, as if glad to be off stage. You loop its thong twice with your practice knot. Ambitious now rebranded, at least on this ship, as signature. Outside, the horizon is an ink line drawn by a steady hand. Above it, stars write their nonchalant cursive. You think of the Portolan rums and realize the sky is the original chart, still offering straight lines if you know how to lean. You place the stone from the eye back in your pocket. It warms your thigh the way Bimini warmed your fingertips, the way papyrus cooled your nails. The bell offers one last, careful syllable. The ship answers with a creak that sounds, to you, like a librarian closing a drawer. You blow out the lamp, trusting the night to draw its own contours. Coastlines wink and shift in your memory the way they did on paper, and you accept that part of disappearing is the kindness of not insisting. You let maps be what they are, agreements between breath and ink, slowly revised by wind, corrected by wake, haunted by mirage and hope. Somewhere ahead, water will step itself into terraces. Somewhere behind, circles will go on blinking under desert noon. You stand at the chart table a moment longer and listen to the quiet say, again, that the world loves a motif, and that your job is still the same. Don't puncture, only promise. You hover where surge and quiet trade places, and the water keeps brushing your calves with fizzy fingertips, as if the sea were testing a new seltzer setting. Bubbles tickle. Your breath hums through the regulator in the same unhurried rhythm the donkeys clopped in Athens. The ocean, apparently, attended that metronome class too. Ahead, the green-blue hush opens into terraces, ledges stepping down and away until color eats detail and the world becomes gradient. Your hands find the rock. It feels like cool bread crust, fine-grained and steady, with little sand grains that insist on becoming souvenirs on your palms. You descend along a rope that someone, bless them, has tied with a knot more confident than your ambitious signature. The rope bows and straightens in the swell's pulse, a soft elevator between this moment and the next. Light stripes ripple over the steps, your lamp's old trick expanded to cathedral scale so that each ledge looks scalloped with bright lace. Fish move in and out of shadow like punctuation, commas and M dashes in schools. Far above, the boat ticks a low clonk on the chop, cousin to the Bimini hull and the Aegean oarlocks. The family keeping time. Your steady fact folds into place with the ease of a practiced fin. Kick off the western tip of Yonaguni in Japan's Yaeyama Islands. Divers in the 1980s, most famously Kihachiro Aratake in 1986, began describing a striking submerged formation, step-like terraces, broad flat plains, right-angled corners, what some call the monument. The rock is sandstone and mudstone, bedded and jointed. Many geologists point to natural fracturing along those joints and bedding planes, coupled with wave and current planing, as the sculptors of these crisp edges. Tectonic uplift and changing sea levels got the platform to this depth. The sea's long patience did the rest. You drift along a wall where the stone drops into a narrow chute. Surge slides you forward, then back a polite usher, and you practice letting go, the way you did when maps winked and islands came and went beneath your finger. Here, edges are as tidy as any harbor. You turn your head, and a square notch looks, for an impish second, like a doorway for disciplined fish. A butterfly fish peers from it like a librarian checking your credentials. You tilt your slate in a respectful salute. Even underwater, libraries find you. Historians still argue whether anything here shows the touch of hands beyond nature's, if people once cut, leveled, or aligned portions of the rock, or if all the right angles and tidy steps are the kind of geometry the sea can produce when given bedding planes, joints, and time. Some wonder if the sharpest ledges are simply the most resistant layers, standing proud as softer beds weathered out. Others point to what look like straight walls, a pillar here, a possible causeway there, and ask whether modification might have happened when sea level was lower. The debate turns as the surge does forward, back, never violent, always insistent. You ease onto one broad platform and rest your palm flat. Sun warmth lingers faintly, thinner than the honeyed heat that soaked Bimini stone, but real enough to remember. A race the size of a paperback glides up to consider your glove. You can almost hear it clicking like the parrotfish carpenters you met before tick filing forms in triplicate with the Department of Edges. That's your first soft joke, and the RAS pretends not to laugh because RAS are professionals. From the corner of your mask, a cloud of glass minnows becomes confetti, and then logic again. You kick to the next drop, and the monument reshuffles into a stage of stacked risers. The swell gives a nudge. You drift over a clean 90-degree line. Your brain does that pleasant double-take it performed in the eye of the Sahara when circles pretended to be architecture. Here, architecture pretends to be circles' cousin, rectangles layered like a book left open at the stairs chapter. You remember how the Cretias broke off mid-sentence. Yonaguni seems to offer an ending with no words, a paragraph in stone that doesn't mind if you read it as geology or as ruins, so long as you read it gently. A narrow trench invites you 2 walls, shoulder wide. You hover in its middle and let the water slide you like a bead on a string. The floor is flat as a table. The sides wear shallow grooves that could be bedding relief or tool dreams. Your light brushes the corners, and shadow behaves impeccably. A less attested tale swims alongside some local divers, like to say they've heard flute music on especially calm evenings, a low, wavering thread under the surge, as if a dragon from Ryukyu stories were practicing scales in the next chamber. Charming, unverified. You file it with your mariner's bell and your cinnamon wind, and for a second, you almost taste wood smoke sweetening the brine. You pause by a ledge where a rectangle sits proud, the turtle to certain tour briefs, though today it looks more like a politely folded futon. A pair of batfish suspend there like unread footnotes. The current freshens, and you tuck close. Your bubbles run their fingers up the stone's face. 5 quick notes. Joke number 2 arrives like a shrimp with an opinion if there were an underwater gym. This would be the Stairmaster set to ancient, and you would still choose gentle incline because you're here for story, not quads. The batfish approve your priorities and resume being punctuation. On the next step, a narrow channel edges off to nowhere sensible. You peer in and find a darkness that feels like a library stack at closing. The air back in Alexandria cool on your wrist bones. You half expect a cat to materialize and check your borrowing limit. Instead, a sweep of sardines flips like a page, and your lamp beam ripple rides their silver backs for one elegant sentence before the words disperse. You think, not for the first time, that the ocean is very good at calligraphy. The steady fact taps again with a gloved finger. Currents here can be mercurial. Guides brief you on the washing machine mood. Bursts of push that rumple even careful divers. You move with the pulse, not against it, practicing the same soft-footed respect you learned in the marsh at Helike and the meadow under sea at Doggerland. Your leg remembers the North Sea intern sloshing in your boot, and you smile into the regulator at the thought of an administrative transfer to Western Pacific intern, unpaid. Excellent benefits in humility. You angle up and out along a ramp that could be natural bedding stepped just so, or could be a place where a human hand once saw a ladder and coaxed it sharper. This is the hinge of the argument, and you feel it in your shoulders. It's the same gentle tug you felt over Bimini's rectangles and the eye's circles. Your mind loves a pattern. The sea loves a story. And you are the person in the middle with a pulse that steadies when both show up. You remember your compass trembling on the chart table and decide it, too. Would like to be lowered gently along this edge. A long crack opens into a small pool fringed with coral heads like sleepy hedgehogs. Inside, a hawksbill turtle dozes, tucking a flipper to its beak in a posture of perfect self-embrace. You decline to intrude. Your third soft joke is only a thought you will sign up for the turtle's workshop on naps. Prerequisites waived. The turtle blinks one stamp of approval and returns to its seminar. Historians still argue whether any of this could be Pleistocene handiwork, later swallowed by seas that rose as ice sheets melted, or whether the age of the rock and the lack of artifacts in clear situ argue strongly for natural origin, with any human traces, if found, being later minor or misread. You do not adjudicate. You watch damselfish tend a garden the size of your open hand and feel, honestly, that this is argument enough for time well spent. The surge pauses. You taste the mineral note you've learned to expect: iodine, a little iron, a suggestion of faraway rain. Your exhale throws rings that climb a face and pop like invisible bells. You think of the harbor note in Alexandria, the conch call at Bimini, the single chime you imagined in the dunes and marshes, and decide that if the sea does have a doorbell, it prefers one quiet tone at a time. You ring it once with a puff and move on. At the edge where the ledges dissolve into sand, the steps become suggestion. Grains tick sideways in the faintest conveyor. It's the same fade as always: Bimini's road tapering to glitter, the eye's outer ring melting into plain, the Helike meadow smoothing rumor into reeds. The drawer closes softly. You approve the craft and make a promise you keep making: don't puncture, only promise. You rise with the rope and the swell. The sun grows from mint to lemon on your skin. The boat's shadow cuts a rectangle over water that from underneath looks like another platform you could climb if light were firmer. You surface into breeze and gull and a taste of salt your mouth remembers by now, the way your fingers remember papyrus grain. In the boat, someone passes a towel that smells faintly of laundry and distant cinnamon from a galley pocket, your island roomer paying a friendly visit. You loop the mask strap into your ambitious knot on the rail out of habit. The knot, wiser now, behaves. Looking back, the water is blank as good manners, revealing nothing of the stares that filled your eyes. You like that. The world has been practicing vanishing here for a long time, and doing it with style edges left just sharp enough to teach wonder, just soft enough to deny a verdict. You listen for a bell you don't need to hear, and find instead the old steady metronome of your breath. The boat answers with its quiet clonk. Somewhere under you, terraces keep their conversation in a language of joints and waves. And you, A patient eavesdropper with fish-approved jokes and an upgraded knot carry the sound forward to the next hush. You drop through water the color of old glass, and the light above you folds into bars as if the sun were shelving itself for later. Silt lifts at your passing and curls around your wrists like velvet smoke, warm, gray, and soft. And then the bay remembers to be cool again. Your breath hums in the regulator, that same courteous metronome the Athens donkeys kept, and the Bimini hull tapped steady as a library clock. When your fins pause, the quiet deepens into a soft, almost fuzzy silence, the kind that makes you think of papyrus edges flaking like sea salt, and cats snoring near oil lamps. Shapes assemble out of dusk, first a curve, then a shoulder, then a cheek, a face taller than you are, brows smoothed by centuries of slow touch. Bronze winks from a seam of incrustation. Granite dreams in colossal calm. You reach toward a statue's knee, the politest part to greet, and the stone greets you back with cold that feels earned. Around the plinth, silt swirls again into ringlets. The bay loves a ripple as much as your bedside lamp does. Your steady fact steps forward with the clarity of a diver's torch off the Nile Delta in Aboukir Bay, the sunken city known to Egyptians as Thonis and to Greeks as Heracleion was located and mapped at the turn of the 21st century by Frank Gaudio and the IEASM team, using side-scan sonar magnetometers and patient diving. What they found was a drowned harbor city temples, quays, channels its life stretching from at least the first millennium BCE, its end written by subsidence, earthquakes, and liquefaction where river and sea keep long, complicated accounts. You fin slowly along a block that once had corners as crisp as a scribe's square. Now its edges are softened, like a phrase repeated until it becomes music. A carved falcon peers from weed and oyster. Beside it, a lotus petal holds a puddle of light, gold in green water, a tiny sunken saucer. You waggle your fingers into the beam and watch your shadow become a hieroglyph that means person trying very hard not to bump anything. Your ambitious knot holds your light cord to your harness. Honorably promoted to museum security for the evening. That's your first gentle joke. The bay approves with one small clonk from the lift barge above, a sound that belongs to the same family as the Aegean oarlocks and the Bimini boat tick. Hush, tick. Here, the city rises in pieces that remember their places. Divers ease a granite god upward in a hug of slings. The straps creak faintly, a language of threads. From the gloom, a colossal happy, the personified flood, looms genial and river-shouldered, as if to say the Nile is not done with you, only changing outfits. A king and a queen keep him company, their smiles polished by silt to a gloss of patience. You flash on the rich hush of Alexandria's halls and think how the library tried to keep words dry while, not so far away, whole chambers made of words older cousins stone and ceremony were learning to breathe underwater. Historians still argue whether Thonis-Heracleion's final sinking owed most to one or two sharp disasters, earthquakes, or sudden liquefaction after floods, or to a longer, slower subsidence complicated by sea level rise and the Nile shifting its mouths. They also wrestle cheerfully and at length with questions of role and timing, how this port's prominence compared with Naucratis and Later, Alexandria, whether it was foremost a religious gateway, with a great temple of Amun drawing processions across canals, or equally a customs desk and pilot station for the Delta's busy traffic, the arguments slide forward and back with the surge. Nobody shouts. The silt edits everyone into their best manners. A diver waves you over to read a line on a monolith where letters in 2 alphabets once made polite conversation. You can't decipher in this haze, but you know the feeling. A decree you have met in books repeats itself here. Proof stamped in stone that Thonis and Heracleion are 2 names for one place. The past, like your lamp at home, loves to ripple the same point until it catches the eye. Your breath joins the rhythm. A flatfish the size of a saucer buries itself beside your glove and leaves only 2 periscope eyes, librarianly skeptical, to manage your request for more wonder. The water tastes faintly of iron and river brackish tea with a pinch of old coins. You think of Helike's mud, of Doggerland's peat, of Bimini's salted honeycomb. All 3 are here in new grammar channels furrow through the silt like wide handwriting. Stone thresholds perch where a key's edge used to be. Anchors sleep in numbers that would make a portalon jealous. Your second soft joke arrives when you picture the ancient harbor master with a stamp shaped like a cat's paw, approved pressing duties on cargoes of oil and wine and papyrus, the papyrus decimal system at last, only moist. You snort a bubble and decide that counts as laughter. Gently, a less attested tale rides a current past your ear. Local fishers like to say that on winter nights, when the wind has a clean edge, you can hear a bell from under Aboukir Bay, low and once, as if a dock chained to history gave an experimental ring. Charming, unverified. You label it, and watch how a curtain of silt wavers at the suggestion, as if the story itself had brushed past it. In the next cloud, a narrow stone shrine now pushes its perfect doorway forward. You shine your light in and halt, the way you halted at the marsh gate near Helike, not a place to crowd. Your beam finds a small crab making a brief, important inspection. The crab issues a report and departs. You accept the minutes. The steady fact taps your shoulder again. Surveys here have documented dozens of shipwrecks and hundreds of anchors. A forest of timbers and weights, telling the long, practical story of arrival and departure. Coins cluster like schools of small fish in the silt. Measuring weights keep their discreet heft. Reliefs lie face down like sleepers who drifted off mid-festival. Somewhere under the cloud, a stele from Nectanebo's time once repeated a tax decree known from Naucrates' duplicate witnesses separated by water and found again by persistence. You imagine the scribe who cut those hieroglyphs with such certainty, never guessing a snorkeled audience would someday mouth the signs in a soft, bubbling tempo. You hover above a canal line that your guide's hand map suggests with a finger. The current runs through it as if the groove remembered how to carry barges. You picture boats nudged by poles, palms mirrored in dusk water, lamps practicing tiny ripples on every prow, until the whole procession looks like an idea walking. Your throat tightens with the feeling you get when the drawer of a long-kept story slides open with less resistance than expected. You saw that drawer close at Helike. Here you watch it open, just enough to air the linen, then close again without a click. Historians still argue whether certain blocks show tool marks or natural jointing, the familiar Yonaguni and Bimini tug, now dressed in Nile colors, and whether some alignments mark deliberate procession routes from key to temple, or are simply the clean geometry of a city whose lines survived drowning better than its wood did. You don't adjudicate. You mark the places in your mind with the same care you marked your Portoland's phantom islands, a circle on the margin here, a little compass rose there, each a promise to look kindly. A shadow leans across your shoulder. You glance up and find not a god, but a very large grouper auditioning for the role. Its lips purse. Its eye makes a slow librarian circuit of your gear. For gentle joke number 3, you think if there's an underwater visitor log, the grouper is head of security and stamps your page with a moist approval that reads, "Don't touch the granite." You widen your eyes and nod, promising to behave. The grouper blesses your continuing scholarship and drifts away like a couch, remembering it was once a cloud. Above, the lift bags take a breath and rise. One long exhale, a statue swimming out of darkness to the surface light. Silt throws confetti, then settles at a whisper's pace, affectionate as dust in a library sunbeam. You stay until the water clears, until the face returns from snow to stone, until the canal groove resumes its borrowed river. Your chest loosens with the precise relief you felt when the turtle at Yonaguni blinked an all clear from its nap workshop. The bay learns your pace and, in exchange, asks nothing but soft hands. On the ascent line, you stop at your safety pause, ears clicking, buoyancy trimmed, so you neither rise nor fall. The world hangs. Somewhere above, a bell on the barge gives one careful note, your running joke made literal, or just a metal voice getting a breeze right. Below, the city keeps breathing under silt not gone, only edited, its sentences reversible with patience and air. You add this breath to your private metronome, the donkeys, the oarlocks, the Bimini clonk. The chart tables creak, and see how each beat has taught you to listen for vanishings without panic. You surface into a gray-green afternoon and the diesel smell of compressors. The ordinary miracle of hot tea on a deck that remembers every footstep like a careful ledger. The cup warms your palms. A ribbon of cinnamon sneaks from someone's pocket tin and braids itself into the river's iron tang. Your Santorini rumor now officially following you around like a manageable superstition. You loop your mask strap in your ambitious knot on the rail tradition, demands it, and watch the sling rise one more time, a god's knee clearing water with excellent timing. When the deck quiets, you look back at the square of bay that has learned to keep its secrets in velvet. A cat would love this place. You think libraries below, fish above, sun patches everywhere if you know where to float. You let the thought purr once and then settle. The lesson tonight isn't that cities die, it's that they learn new breathing. The drawer closes softly. You approve the craftsmanship, and as the wake folds behind the boat and smooths itself to silk, you feel the old lamp ripple find your ribs again, steadying your hands for whatever the ocean decides to show you next. Fog beads on your lashes until each blink feels like a tiny curtain rising, and the ocean lifts you like a breath you didn't know you were holding. The boat's hull gives one soft clonk, yes, the same family sound as Bimini's tap and the Aegean oarlocks, and then hushes, as if it, too, is listening. Somewhere ahead, black lava walls lean into coves, and whale song threads through the rock like warm wire, low and patient. Vibrato you feel in your ribs before your ears admit it. The air is a recipe of salt and damp basalt with, inexplicably, a ribbon of cinnamon from somebody's pocket tin. Your Santorini rumor refuses to leave, and you secretly like it. You drift along a quay of dark stone where waves lay their soft punctuation, comma, long dash. Vines climb behind you in neat protective boxes, carrés of stacked basalt that warm and shield them little hotel rooms for grapes. Fully booked. That's your first gentle joke. The island declines to laugh because it is busy being volcanic. Your breath finds the old metronome the donkeys taught you in Athens steady, unflustered while fog smudges the world to just you, a boat, and a note that keeps arriving from somewhere wide. Your steady fact arrives with lighthouse confidence. The Azores are a volcanic archipelago in the North Atlantic. 9 islands strung near the mid-Atlantic ridge. Pico, the dark cone that sometimes hides in its own scarf of cloud, is the highest point in Portugal at over 2,000 meters, and its lava-walled vineyards, these curries, are a UNESCO World Heritage landscape for the way people taught grapes to love stone. Far out from shore, deep sound channels make good acoustics. Sperm whales favor these waters, and the islands once chased them from open boats, New England style, until Portugal ended whaling in the 1980s. Now the same coves launch watchers instead of hunters, binoculars replacing harpoons like a good edit in the margin. A lookout on a headland vigia cups his hands and sends your skipper a sign, old semaphore in new jobs. You grin at the echo of Portland days, when signals and bearings braided a coast into sense. The skipper's hand taps the wheel twice, like your helmsman tapping the tiller near Crete. Traditions move easier than boats. Your ambitious knot secures a coil by your feet, demoted from museum security to deck manners, and does the job without drama. You pat it like a cat, and the knot purrs by not failing. Historians still argue whether the Azores felt human footsteps before the Portuguese in the 15th century, whether Norse sailors or others reached these rocks earlier, as some recent lake sediment and mouse DNA studies suggest, or whether such signals are red herrings stirred by wind and time. They also debate the exact first sighting, a navigator named Diogo de Silves in 1427, a message miscopied in a later chart room. The record keeps its fog the way the island keeps this morning's veil thin enough to taste, just thick enough to be interesting. You don't referee. You let whale song underline the question and file the rest with your shelf of maybes beside the drowned plaza bell and the cinnamon wind. You idle in a notch of lava that acts like an amphitheater. The rock is porous and slick sponge turned to stone and carries the note further than seems plausible. When the whale lifts the surface domes, smooth as dark glass, a fluke writes a parenthesis and disappears as politely as a librarian closing a folio. You can't help a quiet joke too if there were karaoke out here. The whales would win every night, and the judges would be very fair about it. The whale does not comment, which you take as dignity. On shore, the world shrugs off its fog coat, and the day turns the basalt courtyards of Pico's vineyards into a chessboard. You walk a lane trimmed with lichens like pale script, and run a palm along a wall that still radiates dawn heat, warmed like the Bimini stone you touched underwater, only drier, salt crusted around the edges like sugar on a glass. A farmer waves from between curl grids, a choreography learned from grandparents who learned it from grandparents, the same metronome, different instrument. You picture papyrus in Alexandria, the silt in Heracleion, the peat pulling sweet tea from Doggerland. Here, stone pulls warmth from sun and gives it to grapes. The archive is wine. A less attested tale climbs the lane. With you, some islanders say that on certain fog-choked festas, when church bells drag their bronze through thick air, a pod of whales surfaces just offshore, lifting and sinking as if bowing to the peal. Charming, unverified. You label it, and yet the fog today behaves like a bell muffler. The idea fits the mouth of the island so well, you keep it. The way you kept the marshes chiming reeds, and the eyes imagined hum. Your pocket cabinet of maybe gets roomier and more pleasant to sit with every mile. You slip down a footpath into a lava tube, where the air goes cool and smells faintly of iron and damp leaf. Your footsteps answer themselves, then don't, as the tunnel tightens and breath becomes the only metronome. The wall's skin is glossy, like poured chocolate arrested mid-gloss, and your hand light plays that same ripple your bedside lamp loves so much, one small tide returning everywhere you go. You crouch where the tube opens to sea and watch wash after wash lace itself on black stone. Your lamp ripple turned surf lace turned whisper if the turtle from Yonaguni held workshops on naps. This cave hosts the graduate seminar. Outside again, the lookout flicks a hand and the skipper nudges the bow toward São Jorge's long spine. Its cliffs fall into water like pages, and at their feet, the Fajas spread low platforms built by old landslides and lava, the island's softening of edges where villages tuck into wind's lee. Another steady fact taps your shoulder. These Fajas make microclimates. Coffee and bananas once tried their luck here, and still do in spots. A sweet proof that rocks can learn hospitality. You taste a damp greenness over the salt parsley and fern in the same breath, and your shoulders let go of a centimeter you didn't know you were still holding from Abukir's silt. Historians still argue whether medieval portolan hints that look like Azores dots are genuine sightings or cartographic wishful thinking that found rock later to justify itself. They also wonder whether Roman and Carthaginian currents ever threw ships within sight of these black coasts, leaving no line on paper, only a gull's surprised cry and a sailor's pocket stone. You think of your chart table and sandy island vanishing from the page in our time, and it comforts you that maps learn, unlearn, and relearn like any good student. The boat idles again near a seam where lava froze into organ pipes. Water talks up and down them in vowels. A shearwater skates the air with a voice like a squeaky hinge. Tiny librarian needs oil. Joke 3 arrives right on cue. Your rain jacket, slightly too big, qualifies as an ambitious poncho, and you declare it a fashion statement. The shearwater is polite enough not to disagree openly. Whales surface farther off, breath puffing like small kettle ghosts, and you feel the note in your sternum the way you felt caldera, breath in Santorini, and the washing machine surge at Yonaguni physical grammar teaching posture. You set your palm on the gunwale, and the boat answers with that calm clonk, classroom bell of ocean seminars. The skipper lowers the throttle, and time lengthens, becoming wide enough to hold you. The vines, the basalt, the low gray fringe of clouds, the memory of a cat in Alexandria sleeping by a lamp. On Pico's flank, a vineyard path wanders between carrés toward a tasting room where glasses catch a square of sun and turn it into flavor. In the yard, an old Triworks kettle from whaling days sits retired, black and quiet, the past owning its weight without insisting on its old job. You rest your fingers on the rim, and it gives back cool, like the knee of a granite god in Heracleion. The edit from harpoon to binoculars feels almost audible here. If you put your ear to the iron, you swear you'd hear pages turning. A guide points uphill and names craters like cousins. Another points seaward and names currents like streets. You walk with both names in your pocket, old map and new map folding together without a crease. Fog returns, practicing its soft-footed entrance, and little beads set back onto your lashes. The same theater curtain from the morning, ready for Act 2. The whales oblige with a long, slow line, bass and breath. A lullaby so low, the stones take a share. At the dock, a coil of rope waits for a job. You take it up, your hands remembering every earlier knot, and tie the ambitious loop you've been perfecting since Crete. It holds cheerfully, even, and the skipper grants it a quiet boa, simple praise that lands like a stamp in your notebook. Somewhere a bell, real this time, gives one true note from a small white church perched over black rock. The whales do not bow, or they do. The fog is kind enough to keep that secret. Evening leans in. In the bar down the lane, a poster announces a festival with violas de Thera, their twin hearts of string ready to ring the room awake. Your own heart wants the slow version, so you sit on the wall above a cove where waves write a long ellipsis and let the island lesson arrive without fanfare. Some places do not disappear so much as tune themselves to a lower register. Grapes learn stone's warmth. Stone learns to carry song. Whaling tools lean into rest. Maps correct their little dreams. You listen the way you did to reed pens, frogs, parrotfish carpenters, and turtle-nap professors without interrupting. When you stand, the fog performs a small bow and steps aside. Pico, bare-headed for a moment, shows its cone in a cameo. You don't take a picture, you take a breath. The whales breathe too, and the note, long and patient, braids through basalt and vine and your ribs until you're sure it will keep playing even after you turn to go. Your lamp's ripple rises in memory. The drawer of the day closes softly, and the sea good teacher with the steady metronome lets you walk away carrying exactly what you need, a hum that makes room for sleep. You swirl a jar of sand in a quiet lab, and the world inside it turns to a little storm. Grains lift, cloud, then fall heavy ones first, light ones last until the jar becomes a parfait of earth, rusty at the bottom, pale in the middle, peppered at the top. The hum you hear is the bench's mini fridge. and a small blue globe warming your palm with its lamp. But it feels like the planet itself, purring. Your own desk lamp performs its favorite trick, sending a soft ripple across glass. The same tiny tide that has followed you from your blanket to Plato's table to the Bimini shallows. The metronome is present too, cloaked now as a vent fan. Just like Athens' donkeys learned to breathe, you set the jar down and the layers sharpen, edges clarifying the way coastlines do on a good portolan. That's your first steady fact for this room when water slows. It sorts. Big settles first, fine last. A patient rehearsal for beaches, river mouths, and the gentle essays deltas right about time. You tilt the jar, and a rust-orange slip slides over the pale band like a quiet landslide in miniature. Your fingertip on the glass feels the faintest cool dragging under the pad. A weather report for touch. Across the room, a flume tank keeps its own slow conversation. Sand ripples march downstream like tiny braids. A small gate lifts. A pulse of flow quickens. The ripples lengthen and shed off their crests, a smattering of Grain's little parrotfish carpenters working the night shift. Tick, tick, though your ears supply the sound. You remember Bimini's honeycombed blocks and can almost taste sun on wet limestone. The flume hums a polite chord. A measuring rod shivers. Your ambitious knot holds a sensor cable in a tidy loop and behaves like staff. For your first gentle joke, you stick a label on the jar that reads "not tea," because midnight brains are optimists. The lab, merciful, declines to test you. On the wall, an old seismogram unspools its black sinew waver. Spike, rest, and you think of the marsh at Helike trying to be both earth and water at once. Liquefaction soil, forgetting and remembering in quick alternation. You tap the glass over the longest spike and feel nothing but the cool. The drama is all ink now. Stored thunder. The jar on your bench is the opposite kind of history, the calm settling that follows. You tilt the globe in your hand, and the continents slide under your thumb at a speed the eye cannot see, which moves you to the second steady fact this drift is real. By the late 1960s, plate tectonics stitched clues into a consensus seafloor stripes, earthquake belts, travel of fossils and mountain belts, and now maps know their continents walk a few centimeters each year. A dignified promenade you'd applaud if it wore a tux. You pour a trickle of water into a tray and watch a miniature river invent itself headwaters, curve, shoal, split, join, then split again. The river's handwriting looks a little like the canal grooves you traced in Heracleion's silt. It also looks like the laugh lines the sea writes into a beach when the wind has kept one opinion all day. A pinprick of dye blossoms at a bend and flows outward like a rumor leaving a port city. Historians still argue whether the medieval town of Dunwich, on England's soft coast, disappeared mainly in a few brutal storms of the 1200s and 1300s, or in the longer pull of erosion and longshore drift, centuries of sand moving sideways with tireless etiquette. You don't referee. You set your die where the current decides and let it draw its own version of loss. Night gathers at the window with librarian calm. The lab's plastic curtains rustle like papyrus. A wheeled stool squeaks an apology. You open a cupboard and pull out a tray of pebbles, saved from earlier rooms, a chalky eye of the Sahara oval, a smooth Bimini shard, a dark pebble from a Doggerland beach where your boot promoted a North Sea intern. Each weight makes the tray a little more like an index. You line them up the way Callimachus might, if Callimachus collected beaches instead of books. For gentle joke number 2, you consider stamping accession numbers on your socks. You decide the cat from Alexandria would have notes on your methodology. A wave tank glints in the corner, surface as calm as a held breath. You flip the switch and the paddles push a long, slow swell down the tank. Sandbars erase and redraw themselves with each pass. Proof that a shore is a negotiation, not wall, but promise. You set a tiny model pier at an angle and watch the waves rotate sand into a spit. Then watch the spit break and leapfrog, barrier island style, along the glass. The paddles keep time with your breath. The lamp scribbles its ripple over the moving stripe. Somewhere in that rhythm, you feel the Azores whales take another measured exhale, low and kindly. A bass line you could navigate by if charts were outlawed. At the sink, a chunk of soft limestone sits under a dripper. Drop, wait, drop the slow making of a cave. The water tastes faintly of penny. You imagine a stalactite as a very patient sentence. Each drop a letter, each century a paragraph. A less attested grad student legend pads in wearing late nights, and a grin leave the flume perfectly leveled and quiet, they say. And at 2 a.m., it hums one pure note, like the bell you've been hunting through drowned squares, or like a whale coaxing the rock to practice vowels. Charming, unverified. You assign it a spot beside Cinnamon Wind and Paper Towns on maps, and enjoy. For one beat, the idea that the lab itself has a voice when everyone goes home. You note the part's disappearance prefers time, water, gravity, salt, and appetite. Appetite runs a broad trade in reef shallows. Parrotfish turn cliffs into sand with giggles and teeth. In estuaries, bacteria unspool wood into water memory. On coasts, storms carry off corners and leave clean ellipses. Rivers forget their beds and find new ones. Deltas spread like quilts and then collapse into their own weight. Cities go to sleep under ash and wake as museums. Towns walk inland and call it a fresh start. Harbors lift, settle, and lift again. You think of Scandinavia rebounding after ice like a mattress, slow and dignified, of the Mississippi trying to jump channels and being persuaded otherwise by engineering, of islands like Hawaii subsiding grain by grain, while volcanoes elsewhere write the family's next chapter. A stack of core samples leans in a rack like a congregation of gray candles. Each one wears a thin plastic skirt and a label of depth and place clocks that run downward. You hold one to the lamp and see the yearlings of storms coarser, browner, saltier, then quiet season finds, pale and secretive. You remember the grandmother in Akrotiri laughing once, jar in hand, and the donkey earning a promotion. Their moment is somewhere in a core like this. A thin line with a fingerprint in it that nobody will ever find. You love that restraint. You file it under how to vanish with manners. Historians still argue whether Plato's polished island was always a mirror for ethics, or also a memory of catastrophes resung, whether Norse looked upon Azores fog before Portuguese flags, whether the Storega slides waves rewrote Doggerland in an afternoon, or only underlined a slower erasure. You let the arguments loosen your shoulders the way a good stretch does. They mean the work is alive. Your job in this room is not verdict, it is posture. You listen for drawers closing. You listen for drawers opening just enough to air the linen. The globe warms your palm. You spin it gently and stop it with a finger where your day left off Pico's basalt walls, or where your night began, a lamp making a tide on a blanket. The finger lands on ocean more often than on land. Which feels correct? For gentle joke number 3, you imagine a phone alarm titled Rotate Continents Now, snoozed for 200 million years. Geology, busy, takes no calls. A tiny pale moth bats your lamp once, blesses your notes, and disappears up into umbrella ribs. You take the jar in both hands and give it one last, slow swirl, not to erase, only to promise. The layers blur, then settle in the same order as before. That's disappearance's secret you've been apprenticing to all night. It is often just reshelving, a patient rearrangement, not a fire alarm. Bimini's blocks are edges, the sea pencils thinner and thinner. The eye is circles, the wind polishes to thesis statements. Yonaguni's steps are bedding planes discovering their fondness for 90 degrees. Heracleion is a city that switched from air to silt and kept breathing. Helike learned to sink twice and became meadow. Doggerland took its boots off and went waiting forever. Your lamp has been practicing the lesson the whole time. You shut the flume and the paddles sigh to stillness. You cap the jar, not tea. It insists politely, and tie the lid with your ambitious knot, because rituals are small boats that ferry you across. The fan keeps the globe coasts to a stop. Somewhere far away, a bell, real, not imagined, gives one tidy note. Maybe from a white church on black stone or a barge in a green-brown bay. The lab answers by remaining exactly itself, which is the most comforting kind of reply. When you open the door, the hallway light pools like moon on a calm slipway. You carry the jar the way you carried the map, the reed pen, the coin, the towel warmed by sun, the stone from the desert lightly, not to puncture, only to promise. Places learn to vanish. You've learned, so can we, gently, when it's time leaving a kindness in our shape, a small ripple on someone's blanket, and room for the next quiet to begin. You sit at the night's edge like a pier, and soft water keeps its secrets while stars dim to ember. The boards under you are warm from a day you didn't have to carry. Now they breathe out what they saved, and your palms receive it the way you set your hands on Bimini's honeycombed stones, on Yonaguni's steps, on the knee of a granite god in green water. The air smells briny with a pinch of cedar and somebody's contraband cinnamon, the rumor that has followed you from Santorini to here, which at this point feels less like a rumor and more like a traveling friend. A bell far down the harbor gives one true note, your faithful punctuation, then lets the hush finish the sentence. Moonlight combs a long stitch across the surface. The thread tightens, loosens, tightens again, the same metronome you learned from donkeys in Athens, oarlocks in the Cyclades, the Bimini hull, the flume's paddles in the lab. Your lamp at home used to practice this, pretending a tide on your blanket. Now the tide practices the lamp. You pull your knees in, lace your fingers, and admire your ambitious knot wrapped around a coil beside you. It holds. The world approves of small, repeatable triumphs. The pier smells faintly of tar, the honest vanity of ships, and each creak feels like the chart table sighing after a long day of rethinking coastlines. Out in the dark, something exhales, vast and kind. You remember the whales along Pico threading song through basalt courtyards. And for joke number 1, you consider adding adjunct acoustics to their CVs. The sea, merciful critic, declines to respond but sends a small, approving lift that rocks the boards in an A+ for posture. You roll a smooth stone in your palm, the chalky oval you borrowed from the eye of the Sahara. It remembers heat the way the pier remembers sun, and the memory passes to your skin like a secret handshake. Not far from where you sit, some coasts are always not far. When history picks its chair, another steady fact waits with quiet confidence. Off southern Greece lies Pavlopetri, one of the oldest known submerged towns yet mapped. A weave of Bronze Age streets and courtyards discovered in the late 1960s and then reread by sonar and divers. A community that stepped into water and kept living there as lines and corners. A stone paragraph continuing under waves. You picture its alleys, as narrow as this moon path, and feel the old tug to lean over and listen for footsteps that have learned to be fish. The water answers with a cluck under the pier, a cousin to your favorite clonk, and a gull makes that surprised baby cry from your Aegean night. You smile, because patterns are lullabies and the world is good at repeating its best lines. You imagine, for gentle joke number 2, a resume where you list professional staring at water and advanced listening to quiet along with not ambitious. Now tenured. Somewhere behind you, a door shuts with librarian tact, reminding you that not all drawers closing are metaphors. Some are neighbors going to bed. Historians still argue whether the wide unfastening around 1200 BCE, the late Bronze Age collapse that scattered palaces and trade routes from Greece to the Levant, was born mostly of drought and crop failure, of earthquakes that made Helike's night look like a rehearsal, of internal revolts, of migrating sea peoples, or of a tangle of all these, each thread catching the others. You let the argument behave like surf around pilings, push, pull, smoothing its own impatience against wood. The pier knows how to host debate without taking sides. A less attested whisper borrows your ear near the marshes of Doñana in Spain. Some fishers say that on still nights, a long way inland, you can hear the bells of Tartessos ring under the soil, a drowned city or a swallowed shore exhaling history through bronze. Charming, unverified, you label it, yet you cannot deny that your harbor bell has impeccable timing. And the air this close to water carries old stories the way sand carries heat quietly, and without asking permission. You take out your jar from the lab, not tea, and hold it to the moon. The layers are asleep in their best order, coarse at the bottom, fine at the top. An essay in gravity. When you tilt it, the slip moves like a miniature tide, and sets back down like a cat who knows your lap is the right answer. You don't open it. You learn that on night 1, with the map and lamp you are here for promising, not puncturing. The jar is your small, portable Helike, your humane reminder that the gentlest edits teach the clearest lessons. Somewhere a line tightens, and a buoy knocks the piling with the same small authority the grouper used when it stamped your imaginary underwater visitor log, behave. You do. You picture the rectangles at Bimini tapering under sand. Yonaguni's ledges choosing 90 degrees because rock likes to remember how it was layered. The eyes rings blinking under noon so hard the desert had to learn sunglasses. You pictured the drowned canal in Heracleion and the way the current still knew which direction to use for its long, unshowy task. Each place taught you how to sit here, unheroic and useful, letting sleep approach without being chased. You think of maps now, the brave, wrong islands that tried on shapes and bowed out when the ocean took attendance, and feel a generous affection for their courage. Hi, Brazil, Friesland, Sandy Island, thank you for your service. We learned how to erase with courtesy. If the knight offered a course called Cartographic Apologies, you would audit gladly, and your third soft joke writes itself final exam. Open water. You pass by, breathing. The tide noses up one step on the ladder and touches your shoe, then it backs away. Exquisite manners. You take this as an invitation to remember the donkey's metronome, the frog chorus in a meadow that used to be a city, the parrotfish carpenters ticking coral into beaches by the spoon. Your shoulders unknot in increments. You would need a microscope to see. Out across the black, a slow light moves someone practicing the ancient art of getting from A to B by keeping their pulse kind. A breeze presses your shirt and leaves the taste of iron and salt on your tongue. It's the Nile's tea diluted by ocean, the same recipe that kissed your regulator hose in Aboukir Bay. You turn your head, and the pier's planks become pages. You can almost hear a reed pen, Athens, olives. Wax scratch a courteous conclusion no human ever finished writing. The Critias broke off mid-sentence. You forgive it again. Endings, you've learned, are best when they feel like a drawer sliding in without a click. A boat glides in, barely a rumor, and a deckhand loops a rope around a cleat with a knot so ordinary you thrill to it. The line snugs, the boat stills, the water erases the wake before you can say which direction it came from. You slip your fingers under your own coil and retie your ambitious signature to no purpose but practice. The knot sits, wanting nothing, doing everything. If sleep had a syllabus, you think, knot tying would be the lab hands moving, mind slowing, the proof arriving without the math. You lower the jar to the boards and set your stone beside it. A moon and a planet in a private solar system. The Bell Down Harbor offers one last true note. The stars sigh a little and turn down the brightness. You take a breath as long as a whale's exhale, as patient as a desert noon, as quiet as silt falling back into its paragraph. You don't reintroduce anything or summarize. You just sit at the night's edge like a peer, and let the art you came to learn finish teaching you without words. Let your shoulders lower, slowly, as if night itself were a warm hand, smoothing fabric that doesn't need to be perfect to be comfortable. Feel the boards beneath you become soft in your awareness, not because wood turns to cotton, but because your body decides it can rest its weight here, safely, quietly, the way a boat leans into its line and stops arguing with the tide. Breathe in, a little longer than usual, and notice how the air has learned to whisper salt that is almost sweet, wood that is almost warm, a thread of spice that is almost a memory. Breathe out, a little longer than that, and let the exhale join the harbor's hush. One more ribbon on the surface that smooths itself without being told. The world is moving, but nothing is asking you for movement anymore. Let the pictures fade the way fog softens a shoreline, the lamps ripple, the map's freckles, the ringed desert, the honeycombed stones, the terraces under green-blue hush. Don't hold them. Let them recede like gentle waves sliding back through a lace of pilings, leaving only a sheen that catches moonlight for a moment and then becomes the ordinary gleam of polished wood. Hear the single bell note you've been carrying, no louder than a fingertip on glass, settle into the background like a clock in another room. Dependable, unurgent. If you want, tie a very small knot in the air with your breath in, over, under, through, and out. It doesn't have to hold anything. It doesn't have to be ambitious. It only has to give your hands permission to be still. When a stray thought arrives, let it step onto the pier, look at the water, and decide on its own to keep walking down the dock until it becomes part of the night. You don't have to push it. You don't have to follow. You are already where you need to be. The quietest seat in a room that remembers how to take care of itself. Notice how the room you're in, your real room, right now has its own soft tide, maybe the fan, maybe the air through a window, maybe only the even rise and fall of your chest. Let that be enough. The edge of the night is the safest edge there is. It doesn't cut. It cushions. You can lean here. You can drowse here. You can disappear without leaving, the way a footprint fills with the next wave and the beach. Kindly goes on being beach. If your eyes want to close, let them. If they want to half close and float, let them. If they want to watch the last ember of a star decide the day can have it back, let them. Nothing is urgent. Everything important knows how to wait. The drawer slides in. No click, just room for sleep to begin. Soft and sure, like a small boat rocking once, twice, and then forgetting to rock at all.